Mrs. Belford,
Yes, ma'am.
we're streaming now, so you can begin whenever.
Great, thank you. Good morning. The April 21, 2020 BFT Board Workshop is now in session. As is necessary today during the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, we are modifying our workshop process to address health and safety concerns and are holding it virtually. The public may join us via our usual streaming channels. I ask for Ms. Escobar to call board roll, and then we can verify who is joining us via Skype.
Thank you. Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Mrs. Campbell?
Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
Present.
Mrs. McDougall?
Mrs. McDougall?
Present.
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Mr. Susan?
Present. Present.
Okay. All board members
All
are
board members are
present.
present.
Ms. Escobar, did you want to verify any of the additional members joining us via Skype?
Certainly. I will call them as I see them, if that's
As
okay.
I see them, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Mr. Alba?
Mr. Alba?
Present.
Ms. Green?
Ms. Green?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Mr. Langdorf?
Present.
Dr. Thetty?
Present.
Mr. Colucci?
Present.
Mr. Gibbs?
Here.
Ms. Klein?
Present.
Ms. Lisinski?
Present.
Dr. Mullins?
Good morning. I'm here.
Ms. Moore?
Present.
Mr. Savage? I see that Mr. Savage is signed on, but I don't hear him, but perhaps he's muted. Ms. Schwint?
Present.
Ms. Skipper?
Present.
And Dr.
Hi.
Sullivan?
Hi, present.
And you said Kyle is with you? Or Mr. Savage?
He's on the call, but he's not with me.
Okay. All right, those are the persons who are joining us via Skype.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. The Board of Teachers has asked to discuss 4 topics today: mental health, substitutes, health insurance, and recruitment and retention. The plan, I believe, is for BFT to have about 15 minutes to comment, followed by time for the district, and then discussion collaboratively. I request that Ms. Escobar remind the parties when they have 3 minutes left, if we're hitting that 15, just so we can keep it on schedule. And at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Colucci, President of Brevard Federation of Teachers.
Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, Pam, I'm wondering, is the presentation going to be up for everybody to see, or is everybody just looking at it individually?
Mr. Colucci, I did not receive anything from you. When did you send it?
I sent it yesterday afternoon.
I will find it, and then I will forward it to everyone, if that's okay.
Sure.
Or let me make sure. I looked for it, but I didn't see it. You can also present it from your end if you'd like.
Okay, so I am going to share content. I believe, is that what I'm using? Share content?
That's
Let me
correct.
make sure. Yes.
Okay. I am not seeing what to do after I press share content.
Mr. Colucci, if you look at the bottom of your Skype screen, you should see 4 buttons. And
yeah, he's listed
right
as
next to the
attendee,
red
but
hang up button is a button to share your screen. Did you press that?
he's listed as an attendee. I don't know that he can. He's not under presenters.
All right. Hold on a second.
Do you want to send it to
Colucci,
me, Mr. Colucci, and I'll share my screen and put it up there?
Yes.
I just made you a presenter, Mr. Colucci, so it may allow you to share now.
Let me try that. Are you guys seeing anything?
I'm seeing black screen.
Yeah.
I see a black screen right now.
All right, so share window. Okay, let's see.
That should have opened up like a pop-up of some kind that allows you to share the screen that you want to share.
Yeah, I'm clicking on it and then nothing is happening. Here, meantime, Pam, I'm gonna forward this, or I'll forward it to Pam and Beth, and somebody get it open. Okay. So I just resent it. All right, I'm seeing it now come up. Somebody's sharing it.
I think that's him. Maybe that's why they're having trouble.
Kyle says that he's sharing it, but he's apparently muted.
I think Kyle can't unmute himself for some reason.
I have it up on my screen. I'll go ahead and share my screen if you guys would like. Mrs. Belford, does that work for you?
That's perfect, Dr. Teddy, thank you. Ms. Escobar, could you see if you have the ability to unmute Kyle as well?
We're looking. Savage. He's not muted.
Mrs. Belford and Mr. Colucci, I believe I'm sharing the BFT presentation right now.
Yes, I see it.
Just let me know when you want me to advance slides and we'll move forward.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. In the meantime, if we could try to figure out how to get Kyle off of mute, that'd be fantastic. So first of all, I want to thank the board for holding this workshop with us. Really hoping that we could work collaboratively today to proactively do some problem solving. Also, I'd like to just take a second to compliment everyone on how well Brevard County Schools has handled the COVID-19 crisis. Our teachers have been amazing, staff has been amazing, our parents and students are doing fantastic, and the board and the superintendent are doing a great job leading us. So just want to take a second to thank you guys for all that. All right. So with me today, I have our Vice President, Vanessa Skipper, and Treasurer Kyle Savage, who is stuck on mute, and not sure if Jonathan Hilliard, I think he must be having some technical difficulties getting in. So we've asked to discuss 4 topics today: instructional staff, mental health, the substitute shortage, health insurance, retention, and recruitment. The more we research these problems, the more we realize that none of them was completely independent of the others. They all influence one another. For each area, as we present, we'll give you a why we think this is important, some background on the issue, what it looks like to BFT, and then some solutions. And then, as Ms. Belford mentioned, the board will present, and then hopefully we'll have about 30 minutes for discussion on each topic. So Dr. Theddy, if you want to advance to the next slide. So our first topic, instructional staff mental health. Why does this matter? Improved mental health leads to better employee attendance, performance, fewer accidents, workers' comp claims, turnover, and healthcare costs. And that comes directly from the EAP supervisor training PowerPoint. So those are good reasons that I'm sure we all would support as far as focusing on this topic. Dr. Theddy, if you want to advance to the next slide. Some background on mental health. An estimated 26% of American adults, about 1 in 4, suffers from a diagnosable mental disorder each year. Looking at that and knowing the number of teachers we have in BPS, so theoretically there are 1,227 teachers in BPS suffering from a mental disorder. And with that, we're talking about depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. Some other things that we think are probably more prevalent as well would be PTSD. And also, we've hit on something else that's coming to light. They're calling it secondary traumatic stress, which is basically teachers who are so involved in their students' lives, and many students are dealing with poverty, grief, family problems, racism, drug abuse, etc. What they're learning is that teachers are also showing characteristics of those symptoms just as the victims would. And then we're also maybe not considering people with mental health disorders, but folks that just need some mental health counseling, but maybe not as severe. Depression is the most prevalent chronic condition in BPS. We learned that from Cigna. We have 16.1% of our members on the plan who are suffering from depression versus a norm of 10.3. 43% of adults with mental illness get care every year, which means 57% of adults with mental illness are not getting care, and 64% of adults with serious mental illness get care, which means 36% of adults with serious mental illness are not getting care. I want to move on to the next slide. So the question becomes, what does this look like to BFT, and why BFT brought this this issue is because we're seeing it in many different ways, especially in discipline and evaluation issues. And what's concerning to us is oftentimes it's the Brevard Federation of Teachers that is identifying the issue with mental illness and referring the teacher to EAP. So this comes from the EAP training manual. If you look at patterns of work performance problems, so looking at absenteeism from work. We have unauthorized or excessive absences. I've been in discipline meetings and evaluation issues surrounding that issue. Difficulty making changes, resistant to learning new procedures, skills, or responsibilities. We know that education is always changing, and you have to be able to adapt and learn new things. So if mental health is interfering with that, that's going to be a real challenge for the employee, their students, and supervisor. Erratic work patterns. We have inconsistent level of performance. I've been in meetings with that. Difficulty concentrating. Employee forgets directions and instructions. General lower job efficiency, things like missed deadlines, complaints from coworkers or customers, frequent excuses for performance. I've sat in meetings this year about all those issues. Confusion, difficulty recalling actions or mistakes, behavioral, for example, overreacts to real or imagined criticism. You know, as teachers, we have to be able to accept the feedback that administrators are providing us and improve on that. And if mental health is preventing somebody from doing that, that's not going to be a good situation. As far as evaluation issues, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with our IPIS. It has 25 elements on which a teacher is scored and expected to be at least proficient. So if a teacher is struggling with their mental health, they're going to struggle to be successful with their evaluation. The overlap between expectations on the evaluation and areas those struggling with mental health are going to overlap. Discipline is especially concerning for several reasons. Even something as minor as a letter of reprimand gets sent up to the Department of Education, which then involves a 2-year investigation, approximately 2 years, and almost always results in some sort of sanctions against the teacher's certificate, whether it's a fine, coursework they have to take, put on some sort of probationary period. If you go to the next slide. So I reviewed all 24 unique individuals that I went in to represent so far this year for discipline issues, evaluation issues. And, you know, looking at the list I shared of what administrators should be looking for as far as mental health issues, I would surely say, and I was actually surprised that it was this high, that out of those 24 individuals, 12 of them, I believe, were having some mental health concerns to various degrees. So I put together this chart that shows of these 12 individuals, you know, what happened? How did this play out in these meetings? So had 1 receive a summary of conference. I had 2 receive letter of reprimands, which once again, those go up to the DOE for an investigation. I had 1 termination. I had 1 teacher resign in lieu of termination, 1 resignation, 1 go on a leave of absence, 1 found unfit for duty, 1 forced to transfer to another building, and 3 of them there were no actions taken. So out of those 12 people, we actually lost 6 of those people. So when I say these are overlapping, so now we need substitutes in those classes. Now we need to recruit six more people. So there's going to be a big overlap. I will remind you too that we lost 1 on letter of reprimand, because for annual contract teachers, if they receive a letter of reprimand, in most cases, that's going to prevent their automatic reappointment. All right. Moving on to the next slide, some further ways that BFT sees as mental health issues are with overwhelmed teachers. They're using words like stressed, afraid, depressed. We're seeing that sometimes they have self-esteem issues. You know, one illustration of this, and I've shared this with Dr. Mullins previously, is, you know, Friday, 4 o'clock in this office, 4:30, we're getting calls from teachers completely overwhelmed, stressed out, talking about student discipline problems. And, you know, I'm telling them, look, go home, enjoy your weekend. Don't worry that your second graders are misbehaving. Administrators are well aware of the challenging behaviors that some students are exhibiting. It's not your fault. It's okay. Put this aside for a couple days and come back and do your best. But folks are having a difficult time doing that, and I think they should be calling EAP rather than calling the union office. I mentioned ineffective instruction, 25 elements on that IPIS. If folks are struggling for mental health issues, they're going to have a real tough time with that. And then, of course, if it's not just an evaluation issue, we believe in this district, those are the things that you need to do to be successful in the classroom. So our students aren't going to be receiving the effective instruction that they deserve. And there's been a big push, as you guys know, over the last couple of years to support students with their own mental health. And I question how effectively a teacher who is struggling with their own mental health can help a student who's struggling with their mental health. And then we have overwhelmed teachers may leave if a better opportunity arises. We've seen that happen many times. And, you know, as far as recruitment, it's really sad to say, but overwhelmed teachers are not going to recommend the teaching profession to their students. And that's sad. And I think, you know, we've all been guilty of that. And actually, our state organization, as embarrassing as it is, we had to pass a resolution at our last conference to say, we're going to stop speaking negatively about education to up-and-coming students because we're hurting the profession. But that's all rooted in being overwhelmed. Okay, moving on to some solutions. So first of all, the overall solution needs to be that there needs to be district-wide awareness of teachers' mental health issues. Administrators need to be acting before a crisis occurs. We need better employee education about EAP. And EAP, by the way, provides short-term counseling, financial, legal, and other work-life support services to our employees and their families. Also provides assistance to employees having difficulties in the workplace. So some of the ideas that we were brainstorming for better employee education were perhaps it's time to start text messaging employees about EAP. It's my understanding, I think Mr. Langdorf's going to talk about it some more, that there is unlimited phone counseling, but for instance, that information about this phone counseling is very limited. We talked about maybe we need to display on the main page of the BPS website a link to EAP, or we talked about should we create an employees only homepage or website where they can more easily access this information. Another solution is we believe that our administrators need better training. As I mentioned earlier, it's oftentimes BFT that's pointing out the need for EAP. We talked to Cigna, and Cigna does offer mental health first aid for leaders. Apparently they offered one, and Mr. Langdorf attended, so maybe he can talk about it briefly, but they said they would be willing to offer that to all of our administrators. And then moving on to the last slide about solutions. We think that perhaps increasing the number of free face-to-face counseling sessions from 6 would be beneficial. So right now, if you have an issue and you want counseling through EAP, you're cut off at 6. We discussed it with Cigna, you know, why is it 6? Apparently this is just a number that our plan has decided, but I, you know, wonder and I doubt that 6 sessions is going to be enough to properly help somebody who's suffering from depression or anxiety. And there's kind of, I think people who've used EAP know, oh, well, you know, first I say I have depression, then I say I have anxiety, and I could get 6 more visits. And to that, we're saying, well, why would an employee have to do that? I mean, if you could get 12 visits by switching your issue, just give them 12 visits and let them be honest about what they're struggling with. And then we talked about EAP before or in lieu of discipline. As we looked at those mental health concerns that often become discipline issues, we feel that in many cases that EAP should be offered before a teacher is disciplined for their performance. Now, I realize there's going to be situations where that's not feasible, but it is feasible for many issues, and our employees should perhaps have that opportunity to get some help before they're disciplined and putting their career in jeopardy. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about mandatory EAP. I feel like the district's been hesitant to make EAP mandatory for employees. And honestly, it's hard for the union to recommend mandatory EAP, but it's even harder to watch teachers spiraling out of control, hurting their own careers, thinking about how it's impacting students. One of our values with mandatory EAP, and I think it's always been the case up until this year, we saw an instance of otherwise, is that mandatory EAP is done during the teacher's workday unless the teacher wants to do it after hours. You can't really mandate something when it's off hours. So I've looked through the EAP manual, and it suggests that a consultative call is made by administrators to HR before mandatory EAP is assigned. We'd like to maybe see that process shored up some with some concrete criteria about what's being used to determine when and if mandatory EAP is assigned. We certainly want our employees to get help, but at the same time, we want clear and objective criteria in place. So that is the end of my presentation about instructional staff mental health. I'm not sure, Ms. Belford, if you want to have folks ask me questions or go on to the board's presentation and then discuss.
Actually, Mr. Colucci, I think let's go ahead and turn it over to probably Dr. Thuddy and or Mr. Langdorf. And then we'll see if what they'd like to share, and then I'll open it up for board questions or comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Belford. I'm going to, I think I should be sharing my screen that shows our mental health slides, and at this point I'll turn it over to Mr. Langdorf to speak about it.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to communicate today about our EAP process first, and talk a little bit more in detail in the next couple of slides. As far as our EAP provider, we contract with health advocates to be that provider for us. And that provider is at no cost to any employee or their family members, whether they're inside the state or outside of the state. So that's why EAP is such a great benefit, because there is no cost to employees or their families if they need help with that. What our contract provides is 6 in-person counseling sessions per issue. And I know Mr. Colucci mentioned that maybe we can increase that. Contractually, that's what we have with our contract. When we talk about issues, they might have multiple issues going on at the same time. So they might be suffering from anxiety and depression and other issues like that. That's how they can expand it to more than 6 sessions. So if they address 6 sessions to depression, 6 sessions to anxiety, that gives them more opportunities to meet with a counselor in person. In addition to that, our contract allows for unlimited telephonic counseling sessions. So once a relationship is developed, a person can actually meet with the same counselor telephonically as many times as they need to over the 12-month period. So there is no limit to telephonic counseling sessions. In order to set up a meeting with the counselor, basically all an employee or their families have to do is call the 1-800 number that I've included here, or they can reach out through the web at the web address that's listed there. When they communicate with the EAP initially, there'll be an intake counselor on the telephone that will do kind of a triage of what their problems might be. If it's a personal issue, they're going to refer them to a licensed mental health counselor or maybe a psychologist or psychiatrist. If it's something that has to do with financial issues or stress, they're maybe having a legal issue, they will then refer them to a specialist in those areas. But that's basically how things are pushed out to the different counselors that are provided there. Individuals at that point will work directly with those counselors on the problems they're having in order to resolve some of their issues. As far as how we promote EAP, the biggest way and the best way we've been able to find is through our monthly spotlight on benefits. And we've had quite a few articles related to that. In fact, in the last EAP session, or last spotlight on benefits, we provided quite a bit of information to the spotlight on benefits. Now, those are sent out to all employees. We typically will post them on our Facebook page, and oftentimes I'll send them over to BFT so they can post the same thing on their Facebook page. In addition, we do periodic trainings with our directors and principals. We need to do a little bit better job on that more often, but we recently had a training in February with our secondary principals. We would have had one this month for our elementary principals, but because of the COVID-19, we had to put that off. Our plan at this point is to have a more thorough training sometime during the summer, and that will be in conjunction with labor relations on how EAP works. So we think that's a great way to get that word out. In addition to that, on an annual basis, we have meetings with our site benefit contacts, and we provide a session on EAP to describe to them, and they could take that information back to the school to help anybody who might have an issue. If you go to the next page, Beth. Some of the things that I think are important for everybody to understand with our contract, that is, when it comes to mental health, they will set up licensed mental health counselors to help people with family or parenting issues, or if the issue is depression or anxiety or stress management, those counselors have specific training in those areas. In addition to the mental health issues, often mental health is driven by other pressures that may not be related to stress on the job and that sort of thing. So for example, an employee may be suffering from presenteeism, meaning they're at work, but they're thinking about other things, so they're not focusing on work because they're thinking about how do they take care of their mother or their grandparents or childcare. So our EAP contract helps in identify and help them with elder care or child care. They also can help people balance their work life and family life. If they have legal concerns, they can help with that, and even time management and occupational stress. So those are the different things that they offer through the EAP process. If you'll go to the next page. To give you an idea of the training that we gave in February, we met with the secondary principals, and we were planning, like I say, we had plans to do this with elementary principals to go over the different types of supervisor referrals that could be made through the EAP program. Basically, there's three. The first would be an informal referral where a principal or a supervisor is noticing an employee is having trouble with their personal life, something that's happening. Oftentimes, those individuals will have direct calls or contacts with their supervisor saying something's going on. On the informal process, where we would want to encourage our supervisors to invite people to contact EAP, we provided call-in cards to the school principals and others that they might be able to hand out and say, if you're having a hard time, consider giving this a call. That would be an informal referral to EAP. Then there's the other two. The second is formal, where their supervisor is seeing a pattern of deteriorating work performance. Sometimes we see that, we're not sure what to do, but we did train our secondary principals on looking for those types of things, and at that point they can make the arrangements by contacting the EAP provider, letting them know that somebody is having a problem and they're going to make the referral. They would then make that referral to the individual, and EAP would follow up with the supervisor to let them know that they did indeed contact them and they're starting to help them with those areas. The last type of referral is a mandatory referral, and that's where the situation has become rather serious. It has to do with policy violations and that sort of thing. Those are the telephone calls that would come into our labor relations department, and they would make a mandatory report to EAP. And so that's the process of what we trained our principals in February, and then we'll take a bigger slice at that in training more in depth on how that process works during the summer. It is important to note that through the formal and the mandatory that we do want our principals and those to contact EAP first, so then they can be aware of what's going on. We call that connecting the dots, so to speak, so that the supervisor can describe the problem to the EAP before the call takes place or before the mandatory call takes place, so they can start to address the issues. Doing that does lead into better outcomes, and we're hoping that we can get more of that to take place through this next year. All along, when these things are happening, we're asking the supervisors to be very concerned about the employee's job behavior and performance. We want it to be focused on both of those things, performance and behavior. We want them to be alert to what's going on in their work life and what's happening maybe outside of work, to make sure that the employee is productive on the job. And when things do get out of hand, we would like them to act quickly for the welfare of the employee as well as the organization. So those are the things that we trained in February, and we're going to look to train even further during the summer. Beth, if you go to the next page. I did want to give you an idea of where we were with our reports from 2019-20. Here in the attached, you'll see the activities at a glance, and you'll see three different lines there. The 931 that's listed in green there is actual cases that were set up. So basically what happened here is an employee or their family members contacted EAP, and their calls were serious enough that they needed to set up with a counselor. So we had 931 of those calls that happened last year. If you look at the hours at a glance, which is right next to that in green, of those 931 cases that were set up, over 3,023 hours were dedicated to help those individuals with those problems. So you can kind of see how that works as far as telephonic visits as well as in-person visits. All of those are listed in those numbers. Under activity at a glance, under the 387, that is the number of critical incidents that may have been passed along communications between human resources and EAP on how to resolve some issues, as well as the number of people that EAP spoke to during our benefit fair that happened a few months back. So this gives you an idea of the number of people that were involved there. In the next slide, where it talks about supervisory and support hours, that's how much time was devoted to those 387 people. On the last thing under activities at glance, where it talks about 2,338 clicks, basically those are folks who went into the EAP website and they looked and found articles, different things that might help them. If you've not had a chance to look at online at our provider, there is a wealth of information that people can read about. There's a wealth of information that could be learned on in trainings that are videotaped and promoted to people, and that's what we do as far as EAP. In addition to EAP, and I didn't put a slide on that, so I just thought I'd talk about it quickly, for those who are on our health plan, they can also seek counseling through our contract with Cigna, and they can set themselves up with a psychologist or a psychiatrist through that plan as well. The key to me is that EAP is at no cost to employees, and it's a great service, and we are getting fairly decent usage. Just to give you one last stat, I communicated with EAP yesterday, and I wanted to find out, how does the Brevard system stack up with other entities that they had? What they indicated to me is that on an average client of theirs, EAP is utilized about 3 to 5% of all of the time. Ours is about 14.4%, which some people might think is high, but I think it's great, because that's getting our employees to the people that could help them resolve the issues that they're coming from. And that's really what we want to do in promoting our EAP process. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Landor. Board members, any of you have specific questions for either Mr. Colucci or Mr. Langdorf on the mental health?
This is Katie Campbell. I have a question on the mandatory EAP. When you say, Mr. Langdorf, mandatory, is that mandatory to report or it's mandatory for the employee to get the counseling?
That's mandatory. Typically, what we're talking about with mandatory EAP, it's something that our labor relations department has deemed it mandatory that they go through EAP counseling. So they will make the arrangements to do that. And if an employee doesn't participate in it, they could be subject to discipline. So that's why we call it mandatory EAP counseling. Oftentimes, I've seen this as fitness for duty exams and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Langdorf, I have a question. This is Vanessa.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Did you say that I heard you talk about comparing the EAP web visits. Was that comparison with other school districts or comparison overall?
What's listed on the activities of the glance is just the number of clicks that went into our EAP page. How Health Advocates is able to track it is the 800 number is specifically assigned to us. When people go into our webpage, it's a webpage specifically assigned to the Brevard County School System. So they can track how many times their website has been clicked on and the articles that people are reading. So they could be reading any number of things: how to deal with depression, how to deal with stress, how to deal with a coworker that they're having problems with. There's a lot of different things that employees are clicking onto and reading those articles and actually seeing YouTube videos. If you recall, in not the last one, but the last, or the Spotlight on Benefits that I did prior to the last, we sent out links that people could read, could click on a video to show a counselor from our EAP providing information on the COVID-19 and how people can address some of the concerns that they have. So there's great information on the website, and that's what that is, just a listing of how many times it was utilized last year.
So I heard you say our percentage was 14%. So is that 14% compared to other school districts, so other careers like ours, or to the EAP in general?
No, how that is actually determined is by health advocates. Is they take the number of employees on that have been sent over on a file, so they know who our employees are because we send out a list of those who are employees, and they divide that by the number of cases that were set up. And when you do that division, or that math, comes out to 14.4% of our employees are engaged in some sort of care with a counselor, either telephonically or in person, during 2019-20. So that 931 represents 14.4% of our staff.
Ms. Belford, can I say something real quick? It's Matt Susan.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to give Mr. Langdorf a huge shout out because about a year, 18 months ago, I went up and met with Mark over some insurance issues, and I asked him if there was something when I went to each one of my schools, if there was something that I could communicate to each one of the faculty meetings as I went through. And he said right then, he said, the number one issue that I think that a lot of our people could do that you could help me with is educating them on EAP. And he actually explained to me the opportunity that you have that after 6, you can change what you're going into, and then they extend it past the 6 actual visits. So I did just want to tell everybody on the call that Mark was ahead of this, and he was working on it before, and I wanted to say thank you. And it is a severe issue that's going on out there, and I just really appreciate it. Thank you. That's it.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. Are there any additional questions for Mr. Langdorf or for Mr. Colucci on the mental health issue?
I had some questions for Mr. Langdorf. So, Mark, how is the telephonic counseling being advertised? Because I have a really hard time finding that information on the website. You know, to me, it's like 6 clicks into navigating a complicated website where I could find that. So how is that being advertised?
Well, yes, my speaker's still on. I do know that when we sent that information out in our spotlight on benefits, we've indicated that in all of those trainings. In addition to that, when we train the site benefit contacts on an annual basis, we reiterate that many times. The telephonic counseling sessions, there is no limit, and they can set it up with the same counselor time after time. So oftentimes they'll set their own date and time to meet again by telephone. So I think that's one of the ways. Could we do a better job? Certainly, and we will work on doing that, Anthony. If our teachers are not aware that they could do telephonic visits in the number that I've described to you, we will do a better job at getting that information out. Maybe we can develop even more time in one of our future spotlights on how to make a telephonic visit through our EAP. I have no problem doing that whatsoever.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And just, you know, at BFT, our approach to communication is always an all of the above approach. I mean, just between the 4 officers, you know, Kyle wants a text message. I want to go to a website. Jonathan wants to talk to somebody in person. So, you know, we're always in favor of an all of the above approach to communication. That's why I mentioned doing things like text messaging as well. And another question I have is I saw that as well with the mandatory EAP about specific policy violations. Do you know what the specific policy violations are that would trigger a mandatory EAP?
That decision is something that's left up with our human resource department. I'm not generally involved in the mandatory EAP unless they need some help, assistance getting a counselor or a psychologist or psychiatrist set up. but I believe it has something to do with any policy that we have that an employee might be in violation of. So for
Anthony,
example,
I could give you an example, Anthony.
Sure.
Like anger management, when we have an employee that would do something very aggressively out of a fit of anger and not being able to control oneself. That would be an example.
Okay. Do you have a like list, or you work on a case by case basis?
Always case by case basis.
Okay. And then I had one more question for Mr. Langdorf. You attended that Cigna training for leaders identifying mental health issues. Do you feel like that would be something beneficial to offer administrators, as Cigna had said they would be willing to do it?
the course that I attended was an 8-hour training, which I think would be difficult for our leaders to do. I have talked to them about shorter meetings. We haven't pursued it much beyond that at this point. I think the goal that we will have this summer is to work on and having our administrators look at psychological problems that are happening in the workplace, and that Carol Green and I will work on doing that. I have been thinking, instead of using Cigna for that we would invite our health advocates representatives out, because they can address things. I think I don't want to put Cigna down at all, but I believe that I would rather hire people who have a better background with a longer period of time dealing with psychological issues or stress issues to come and give that presentation. And I think our EAP provider would be better than Cigna. So that's the goal for this summer.
Any additional questions, Mr. Clucci?
If Mr. Langdorf will continue to share those plans with BFT as far as what those trainings will entail, regardless of who does it, I would appreciate that.
Not a problem. We'll do it.
Ms. Belford, this is Cheryl McDougall. Can I just jump in for a minute?
Of course.
Mark, I was wondering, on the card that our principals pass out, that we can give them about referring, not referring, but the possibility of using the EAP, does that card really spell out that there might be 16, you can have unlimited telephonic? Because that's an amazing benefit. I've never heard of anything like that. But that's really a very great benefit. And I'm also curious if all of our mental health providers understand that they can continue with unlimited telephonic. And so I guess I would ask us to reach out to our health partners to make sure that who they contract with, all the mental health people, know that that is an option for our staff.
I'm pretty sure all of the counselors that work for or work with health advocates are aware of the unlimited telephonic counseling. I'm looking at the card that I have, and the one that I have in front of me now is an older card, but it does say this 1-800 number is available, 24/7 support on relationship issues, emotional problems, family, parenting, childcare, elder care, financial. A call or help is one call away. It doesn't say unlimited, but it says just call, will help. I'll check and see if they have any card that says unlimited, but maybe that's probably a better message that we put out to say, don't worry about the number of calls that you need to make. Whatever you need, give them a call. We'll make sure that they address you how many times you need to be assistance in those areas. So maybe that's a way of us to reach out to employees and advise them on that there is no limit. But that is built into our contract with health advocates, unlimited telephonic counseling sessions.
Any additional comments from Mr. Langdorf or Mr. Clucci?
Ms. Belford, may I interject for a second? So I think one of our concerns is BFT also when we're presenting this, and I understand that Mark has done a lot of work with the EAP, is how are the principals addressing this issue when they see smaller discipline issues or issues that could be handled maybe with EAP versus going to a discipline hearing, so we help maintain all the teachers we have and not lose them. So that was one of the concerns I know we had.
Kyle, I'm not quite sure what happens when it comes to a mandatory referral, because I believe that's what you're talking about on having administrators understand.
Yeah, or maybe like if there's some way we could look at trying to do more into like a diversion, like when it's these smaller issues before they blow up and become a huge issue. Like I know we're giving out the card and it sounds like we're doing great education for our teachers, but at the same time, like I think we need our leaders to be maybe referring some more to as well to try to, keep the teachers in the profession, because I think that's our goal for everybody involved.
Right. I believe, I don't believe, I know. Yesterday I had a good conversation with Carol Green and Beth Eddy about this, that we really want to focus our training during the summer on how to recognize those issues and what to do when you see those psychological issues in the workplace. I think if we can focus that, we'll do a better job at assisting our administrators in those areas. And I think I saw a message from Dr. Sullivan, who may wanted to talk about that as well.
Hi, I can just, I think, answer Kyle's question. We had the team from Mark's office present on EAP to our principals in February. So keep in mind, we've been closed since then, but it was outstanding. The principals couldn't stop asking questions, really appreciated being given lots of different options for supporting their teachers, discussions around, we had that gray area between a teacher initiating it themselves and it being mandatory. So the representative really talked to them about making it more formal, not disciplinary, not mandatory, but serious referral, so to speak. We were blown away by the options and the support that was out there. And so to Anthony's point, I've been around forever. I know EAP's been around forever, but I don't think any of us really understood how it has morphed over the years to be much more well-rounded support. And those of us that do it and have been in the field for a long time, I don't think recognize some of the positive changes and the growth of the options. So I'm going to hope and believe that things that may have occurred after that point, the principals would have used a different lens. The speaker we had, and I'm sorry, Mark, I can't remember her name. She offered to come out to do faculty meeting presentations, which I know several of the principals were booking her. Again, just to keep this on the forefront of everybody's mind, and that I think Anthony worded it really well. Mental health looks differently in all kinds of people, and our ability needs to grow. So I think we've taken a really good first step, even though it really wasn't the first step. It was probably like the 20th step, but something about it felt like a first step in really reinforcing all the options that were out there. And so I think the principals were just hungry for it. I was honestly really surprised at how they responded to it. They were gobbling up the brochures and pamphlets. They cornered her to book some dates. So I think we'll see some positive adjustments.
Yes, that was Lisa Schmidt who went out and did the presentation. She's our benefit manager, and Lisa is terrific. She's a great presenter. So she'll be part of the training that we do this summer, but we'll also spend some time with our representatives from Health Advocates, because I think that will hopefully make it much more easier for our supervisors and principals to recognize the problems that might be going on in our employees' lives. So I think I'm really looking forward to that this summer.
Thank you.
This is Cheryl. Can I ask one more question? And I'm not sure if it's to Anthony and to Beth. So let's say we would encourage a person to use the EAP and they don't. Anthony, is there anything that you've done to help move some of our teachers to go to the EAP? Because some people don't believe in it. Some people don't believe in counseling. I'm just curious if there's been that many people who won't go to counseling in your experience, or in Beth.
So I would say that oftentimes there's some initial hesitancy by the employee, but I feel like I've been very successful in getting them to see the value of it and to take advantage of it. Oftentimes, though, I'm able to discuss the issue with the administrator and help make the trade-off between a disciplinary action and going to EAP by pointing out to the administrator that it is a mental health issue. Let's try to get this person some help before we go forward with any kind of discipline. And the employee sees that as a win. I think one issue I know I've talked to Dr. Green about is sometimes the employees will say they're going to take advantage of EAP and then don't. And that's where I think we really need to start looking at that mandatory EAP more closely.
I think to add on to what Mr. Colucci is saying, sometimes employees believe that that it's not confidential, that somehow somebody, either their supervisor or somebody in human resources, will find out what their visit's about. And the other piece of it is reassuring our employees that their visits are completely confidential. We do not get information about the issues they discuss, not anything at all. And in fact, when they initiate the EAP, we don't have a record that they've gone. We only get a record that they've gone when we initiate a mandatory EAP, and we just know the visit has occurred, and that's all.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, any final questions? We should be right at our 1 hour on that particular issue. Not that I want to stop us if there's additional necessary discussion, but does anyone else on the staff mental health issue before we move on to our next topic?
Ms. Felford, this is Katie Campbell. I just wanted to say, I jump in there with Mr. Sousa and say thank you for the work that both sides are doing to just highlight this issue. But I do agree that we, with Mr. Colucci, that the more ways that we can educate about this particular program, especially with the EAP, I think the better our employees will be served. And I know we're putting out in the spotlight, and I actually am really happy to see the usage, because I remember back in October when I went around the benefits fair and just saw table after table after table of things that were provided to our employees for free that I was completely unaware of. And of course, kind of new on the, program, but I just, there's just so many things. I wonder how much of it our employees, not reading their email, not aware of everything that's there. So as many ways as we can communicate, you can't make people read their email, but, if we can just get creative and just communicating that out there so that people are aware of the assistance that is there for them, not just the mental health, but the, with billing questions and things like that. There's so many things available that I think would be helpful for our team if they would just take advantage of them.
I thank you for that. Anyone else have any additional comments before we move on to our next topic? All right, then Mr. Colucci, I think I am giving it back to you.
Okay, so we're moving on to the substitute shortage, and if we could unmute Kyle Savage and Jonathan Hilliard's microphones, they will be leading that presentation.
I think we're good. I'm hoping everybody can hear me.
Yes.
All right. So first of all, I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity, and we wish that we were doing this under different circumstances, but we feel like these issues are really important, and a lot of them tie together, and we really want to come out with some solutions out of this workshop. So I want to talk to you about the substitute shortage and why is it important to our students, our teachers, and administrators. First of all, substitutes in the classroom and the shortage is provides an ineffective learning environment for our students. The teacher morale really struggles around substitutes when they have to get a substitute when they're not available. It also encourages teachers to come to school when they're maybe under the weather or need to stay home. And I feel like right now with the COVID-19 and moving into the fall, it's going to be really important that we encourage everybody that needs to stay home to stay home. And finally, I know multiple times throughout this year alone, my administrator has been completely overwhelmed just having to find coverage for classes because there is no substitutes available. Our substitutes canceled at the last minute. So I feel this is a really important conversation. If we can move to the next slide, Dr. Teddy. So what does this look like for BFT? And I kind of wanted Jonathan, if he's on here, to share about what this looks like in the classroom and how it affects the teachers in the classroom. Mr. Hiller?
Let's see, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
All right. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm glad everybody was able to be here and be safe. The substitute issue is definitely an anxiety-producing situation in the classroom. Just imagine, you come in, you're getting ready, and then you get that call from your principal that no one's picked up, one of your teammates are out, and you immediately go into scramble mode. You're looking at roster, you're looking at splitting up anywhere between 4 to 6 kids per class. You're looking at which kids are having, maybe some behavior issues, and you're trying to match them to put them in the most successful situation so you don't get a blowout later, in the day. You're grabbing computers. Pretty much what happens is your entire lesson plan is pretty much shot for the day, because you've incurred, that group of kids that are at different spots in the curriculum than you are, and it's just tough for you to actually teach your kids and their kids at the same time. Also, they're losing their instruction for the day. They're losing that momentum. And another issue that comes up a lot is when we know we're going to be out, say 2-3 weeks into the future, we book a sub. We've created a relationship with that sub, and come morning of, the sub has been pulled. And then once again, you're back into that scramble mode. But what it also does is it kind of leaves a bad taste in the sub's mouth because they have kind of created that relationship with your kids, with you. They already know what to expect in your classroom. Maybe you've shared some techniques with them, different things about how to deal with different kids. And they're ready to go into your classroom, and then, they're pulled at the last moment. Then they are a little more apprehensive of, okay, am I going to get pulled every time I go into Mr. Hilliard's class, or, what's going to happen? So it's anxiety producing on all levels for the teachers, the subs, and of course the students.
Thank you, Jonathan. If we could go ahead and go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the background and the information we found. I don't want it just to come as BFTs bringing you this issue because we think it's an issue. We have the data, and I think everybody on this call probably realizes that this is an issue as well. So first of all, BPS conducted, throughout the year, they tracked the fill rate. And we got this information from a public records request. And I believe a lot of this was already presented at a board workshop in October by Dr. Teddy. So overall in February, the fill rate was 83%. That means 83% of positions that was posted on SubFinder were filled. However, that doesn't show the whole problem for a couple reasons. One reason is I think there was an underreporting issue that some schools were not posting all their jobs. However, I think after conversations with Dr. Teddy and her department that this has been looked at and that issue's been fixed. And the other thing, if we just look at the number of schools below 80% and the actual number of vacancies, vacancies, it's going to be disturbing. So if we go to the next slide, Dr. Teddy. Thank you. I know I'm looking for the slide at number of unfilled positions per month. Unfortunately, February is probably the last accurate month because of what happened with spring break and where we are now. But in the month of February, there was 1,000 unfilled positions for the entire month throughout the district. So although we had an 83% fill rate and it's above that 80% mark, it was still 1,000 classroom positions throughout the month that went unfilled. And these aren't guidance counselors because they wouldn't be posted in SubFinder. These are classrooms that needed a sub that did not get them. And one of the examples I want to talk about is there was a teacher that tried to call in. She had a sinus infection. She tried to call in sick. And when she tried to call in sick, her secretary let her know that she couldn't get a substitute. So that teacher felt pressured and she went to work anyways. While she was at work that day, there was a fire drill and the teacher ends up fainting and walking out. Well, she faints while they're walking out to the field. And they had the school called 911 and she was admitted for an overnight stay. And now that teacher is fighting a workman's comp claim because she got hurt at work and fell. But workman comp has so far denied her claim because she was sick already before she went to work, even though she originally called to try to get a substitute, but that wasn't available. Now, I think some of us would say, well, the teacher should have stayed home, but anybody that knows the teacher and realizes that when their classroom doesn't have a substitute, they're gonna try to do the right thing, what they think they're doing right by their students. If we can move on to the next slide. Another disturbing fact is the schools with 80%, with a less than 80% fill rate are increasing. Some of these months are hard to look at, but if you think about January, we start back late. There's not a lot of school days. So I'm more focusing on the whole month. And if you look at it, each color, so the light blue is the north area, the dark blue is the central area, and the green is south area. And this is all data that's provided by the district. That's why it's broken down that way. But the number of schools in October, November, and December, October, December, and February, there was quite a few schools that fell below that 80% fill rate. Additionally, in the north area, Madison's year average was 39%, and Oak Park's year average was 41%. That's so far this year. I know like the couple ending months will be thrown off, but that averages to over 50 vacancies a month at both of those schools, and those schools are considered priority schools by the district. And I think that would be a high focus. Now, I do know in February that Dr. Teddy started working with creating some type of incentive for the substitutes at Madison, but I'm not quite sure if all the data was able to be gathered to see if the incentive was effective or not. If we can move to the next slide, please. One thing I would like to point out, and this was something that was brought up, I believe, in the substitute survey, and just other factors that we know are keeping substitutes from the classroom is pay. And while the higher end pay scale looks reasonable with a lot of the other counties, if somebody has a high school diploma or an AA degree, they're subbing in the classroom for between $63 and $65 a day. Just to get started, they have almost $100 out of pocket cost. That includes a drug test, a fingerprint, as well as a substitute certificate through the district. So when we look at $63 a day, which I think is very low, we also need to think about how much is it costing them just to sub that first day, because they're going to have to sub. They're going to have that money in their pocket to go ahead and start, even though they're only going to get $63 for that first day. If we can move on to the next slide. And finally, I wanted to bring some solutions. So hopefully we can get some action and move into the new year and try to create a process where we can get more substitute positions filled throughout the district. One of them was an increase in overall pay. Maybe not so much the hiring, but definitely on the entry level with the high school and associate's degree. A second one is creating pay incentives for hard to fill positions. I believe when the survey was done, when they asked substitutes what they would like, a lot of them talked about a small pay raise. But if you actually do like a $20 a day increase for Madison, or Oak Park, or if you sub 5 days in a row at that school, you get a $20 bonus or whatever we're calling it. That's actually more money and probably going to be more effective than doing a 10-cent raise per, per hour. Secondly, there's quite a few solutions throughout the state that other counties have already paid teachers to cover classes for missing planning. And one way this would work in one of the counties is, and this was an elementary school example, is at the beginning of the year for pre-planning, all the elementary teachers would let their principal know if they were willing to cover a class during their planning period throughout the year. And if they were, the principal would create a roster of teachers that can cover classes throughout the day, and then those teachers would be compensated for giving up their planning. And that's something that the district and BFT could negotiate for that compensation rate. The other thought was move more PDs to the summer or the teacher work days. A lot of times on these teacher work days, we're having school-based PD, and I feel like we can move some trainings to those school-based PD days or to the summer so we can avoid, the smallest number of teachers out of the building as possible. And finally was one issue I heard from subs at my school, and I believe Dr. Teddy heard in the substitute survey. I think we need to do a better job at promoting our substitutes throughout BPS. A lot of our substitutes are parents, they're members of the community, and I was shared a story by a substitute at my school that when she was there, she didn't feel like she was part of the team. She didn't feel like teachers engaged her. She didn't feel like administrators engaged her. She didn't feel like people on the staff engaged her. She didn't know how to find the restroom. And sometimes they just need that person to tell them it's going to be okay. Thank you so much for doing this job today, and we really enjoy having you here. And one of those ways I thought we could empower the substitute is maybe every school finds that really valuable substitute. I know we have one at KTU Elementary, and put them on a poster, put them throughout the school, maybe put them throughout the district, and advertise the great things that our substitutes do for the BPS community. And that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savage and Mr. Hilliard. Dr. Fetty, did you want to present any information along that?
I do, thank you. And Mr. Savage, thank you. Even though you and I did not come together on slides or anything like that, you'll find some shocking comparisons that are pretty consistent with what you've presented. So what I have for you today is we have challenges obviously with fill rates. I know, Mr. Savage, you said that the problem with data validity was fixed, but I think we have more work to do on making sure it's fixed. So I have that down as a challenge. Pay and training for subs are some of our challenges. And then, of course, some solutions include incentives and training, and I'll go into all of those right now. I had a little different percentage on fill rate, but you are correct. February was a bad month for us. I have found some questions I have about the data validity and SmartFind and all jobs being posted there. And I've asked some questions and I've gotten some answers that will lead us down a path for the start of the new school year and making sure that we have every job posted so that we can collect accurate information. Pay rates that haven't changed since 2007, and then of course training for subs. I won't belabor this particular slide because we've already looked at it with Mr. Savage, but it's one that I presented back in October and then again in December. But it basically gives you an overview of where we are, where we've been, and you can see that the things that have changed have really just been the minimum wage in 2019 and 2020. And what that has done is it has compressed to some degree our salary schedule. And I know a question was asked regarding what are our percentages. The vast majority, 69, almost 70% of our substitutes have bachelor's degrees, followed by retired teachers and a very small percentage with high school diploma or AA. But most of them have a bachelor's degree, so you can see the salary, the hourly rate is $12.50 for somebody with a bachelor's degree. This is a similar slide to what Kyle presented as well, and it just shows the comparison. We are below the rest of these counties in terms of high school diploma and AA or AS degrees. We're above in some cases in bachelor's and retired. Some districts use contracted services, so it's a flat rate for substitutes. It just gives you a graphic representation of how we look. So in terms of potential solutions, we talked about this in October and again in December. And one of the things, and I heard Mr. Savage reference it as well, we did a survey of substitutes, and we had at last check about 500 and I would say close to 550 responses, which is pretty amazing. And with these responses, I found a variety of different things that came to light. One of which was in the comment section. I read every comment that our substitutes left. And they commented about being anonymous when they get there and anonymous when they leave. And we talked about that as a cabinet and I believe as a board, and talked about acknowledging subs and acknowledging that people need to recognize that they're there. They need to have a contact during the day. We need to have principals and assistant principals and team leaders and others checking in on them to make sure that they are okay, to make sure that they're doing well. It's part of the solution. It's a no-cost solution to just check in with our subs and make sure they're doing all right. Make sure they know where, as Kyle said, the restroom is, the cafeteria, where the gym is, the teacher's lounge, all those different things. So, and I know that Leading and Learning has been a huge advocate, and they've worked with their principals to brainstorm some other solutions and to just look after our substitutes to make them feel more welcome on our campuses. And the other thing that came up was the inclusion of substitutes and activities that the school may be having on a given day. So if it's a faculty luncheon or something of that nature, including the substitute in those activities to make them feel welcome as well. Some incentives that we talked about in our board workshop that are still on the table, and Kyle mentioned them as well. Substitutes pay for drug testing, fingerprinting, they pay for a 20-hour course, and they pay for a district-issued substitute certificate. And we had talked at one point about potentially covering the cost of those things if they meet a certain number of hours, whether I had proposed 500 hours, which is 62.5 days. And we had about 175 subs that would have qualified for that if we implement it. Kyle mentioned a differential for hard to fill or priority schools during the month of February and into March, right up to the day we left on spring break. I had worked with Madison, Dr. Bowens, and with Financial Services with her sub-budget to do an incentive of $20 a day for that school as a pilot. We did not have good collection of data in the 1 month that we were able to run it. I think we ran it from mid-February, about February 15th until March 13th. So I can't really say that it was effective, but it is something that I believe can be effective, especially given the results that we had from our substitute survey, where our subs indicated that a differential to work at a priority school would be a valuable incentive for them to pick up some of those jobs. In doing research on other kinds of incentives, they all cost money, but in doing research on other kinds of incentives, and then given what I know from our substitute survey, there are districts in the country, not necessarily in the state, I didn't find any in the state, that do a differential scale based on number of days in a particular year that a substitute works. So for example, if a substitute has worked 40 days, they increase the daily rate for that substitute $10 or $15 a day to encourage them to work more. And then after 75 days, it gets another increase. There's also the thought of incentives for teachers not to be absent, which it all ties in with what Mr. Colucci said related to mental health, substitutes, recruitment and retention. They're all tied together, and if we can work together to solve these problems, I think we'll see a lot of these issues resolved. Advertising was another thing, and this is where I said Kyle and I did not get together on our slides, but he mentioned some of the same things that I'm going to mention. developing videos. We have videos out on our website right now for beginning teachers that really showcase our beginning teachers. They talk about why they love Brevard schools, why they love Brevard County, why it's a great place to work. We can do the same thing for substitutes and recognize our substitutes. It is a human capital expense because we've got to have people make those videos, but we have a lot of long-term subs who have been in our schools for a long time, and they are faithful substitutes, and I think we'd be able to get a few who would be willing to record videos of why they sub in Brevard County. Advertising for substitutes on school marquees and our website. So we have a careers website where we, if you're interested in being a substitute, you can go, but we don't advertise for substitutes too much beyond that. I know a couple of our board members have done presentations to the parent leadership team and to the community, as well as Mike Alba at various locations around the county, to talk about not just becoming a teacher, but becoming a substitute teacher. Sometimes substitutes feel like they don't have the respect that a teacher has, and I think for us, if a substitute's coming in and taking over a classroom and implementing the lesson plans and trying to carry on in that teacher's absence, I think providing them with that respect and honoring them, like for example, with an exemplary substitute teacher program recognition, like we do with rookie and emerging teachers of the year, looking at some of that development. Again, not no cost, but definitely not a salary cost, just a recognition and a respect. And then the training. I want to talk for just a moment about training. Substitutes, years ago, let me back up. Years ago, we had 2 substitute trainers. We lost them in some budget cuts back about 11 years ago. Right now, substitutes do a 20-hour course, and I don't know if anybody on this call has ever taken the course, but this 20-hour course is, from my perspective, pretty intensive. I've worked my way through only one module of this course. It has taken quite a bit of time, but it's really, it's pretty intensive. It covers bloodborne pathogens, child abuse reporting, school safety and security, what to do if a child has a weapon, bullying and harassment, professional speech and adult conversations that you should and should not have with students, bullying, harassment, discipline, diversity, legal considerations, supporting students with disabilities, and all of that is just the first module. They have other modules that cover advanced classroom management, instructional strategies, exceptional student education, and working with at-risk youth. However, as we all know, the online training may not work as well for every single person. And this online training is for those substitutes who do not have teaching certificates or are not educators in some way. So not even all of our substitutes have to take that training. We've talked as a team about developing orientation workshops, not just for substitutes, but for all employees at various times during the year that would cover some of these issues like school safety and security, what to do in different fire drills and different incidents that happen in a school, how to handle exceptional education IEPs, and how do you implement that IEP, who's responsible for providing you with those accommodations, and how do you implement those with a student. Classroom management's a big deal for our substitutes. A lot of comments around classroom management. How do we work together to train them on classroom management? And then some other suggestions that are not really training. They don't fit in anywhere. They're just suggestions. We, as cabinet and some of our directors have been subbing in schools this year. I think it's important for us to carry that on into, and actually board members as well, into our upcoming school years. It's critical because it brings everybody back into the school. It lets us have contact with kids. It shows us the job teachers and substitutes are doing. And I think it's really, it helps schools with their fill rates if we can get in there on days when we have hard to fill days, like days before holidays. So as far as that goes, I believe that is it for me on substitutes, if anybody had any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Thuddy. Anyone out there have questions for either Mr. Savage or Dr. Thuddy?
This is Katie Campbell. I've got a question for Dr. Theddy. At our workshop in the fall, we had talked about, several of the solutions that you presented today, but one of the things we said we could do immediately that was no cost was just that communication to our principals about, acknowledgement and trying to, just have a different way of greeting subs as they come in and treating them while they're in the building. Do you know is that one thing that has already been implemented, or at least the communication for that so far?
Mrs. Campbell, thank you. Yes, that is something that Leading and Learning worked with principals on. They spoke with them, they met with them in their small groups, talked to them about how to acknowledge substitutes on the campus, doing periodic check-ins throughout the day by administration just to make sure the substitute was doing okay. So yes, that acknowledgement has occurred.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'll just say this issue is just really important to my heart, having been a sub myself, and I haven't been to the 20-hour training because I had a education degree, but I just think that the promoting, like both of you talked about, the promoting the subs, it's always been important to me. I think we need to reach out to our parents. I think that's really one of our most untapped resources for becoming subs, especially with our parents who are super active in their schools. It's such a great way to get to know the school and the teachers, and I love the ideas of just advertising that. And I'm certainly willing to jump in there myself if you need somebody to make a video, because I loved my time subbing, and I just think that there's really a lot of just ways to communicate that we can do better, and I appreciate you guys coming up with those ideas.
Ms. Belford, this is Tina. May I chime in? I just, Dr. Theddy, you asked if anyone on the call had gone through the 20 hours of training, and I have done the 20 hours of training and served as a sub, and I believe the training was very thorough, but maybe you and I can meet offline on some areas that I know it would have helped me, not having an education background, to maybe have a few more classroom management skills up my sleeve, because I know at times I resorted to bringing candy in my bag to help me get through some of the 6th through maybe 8th graders. And so I know there's more tools out there that maybe we can provide some of these subs. Kyle or Mr. Savage, I really appreciate your suggestions and input. I love the sub poster that can translate into social media. Most schools now, PTOs or the schools themselves have social media pages, and they can really highlight their amazing subs, especially the one or two that are really committed to that school. And there's no reason that we can't use, maybe even make videos or something of them talking about their sub experience and what to them. So I think we can really expand on that. I don't know if anyone on this meeting right now is do we have Matt Reed or anybody from communications? Maybe they can work that angle. I appreciate all the work you guys have been putting into this, and I hope we can start closing this gap for filling our subs. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Leskovich. And yes, I echo the words of appreciation. I know we spoke after our last workshop. One of the things that I had started working on was incorporating our subs into our PIN recognition program for board members, which has proved to be a little bit challenging just because you never know when you can actually catch them at the school. So I have a stack that I still need to get out once we are released to go back to some sense of normalcy. But I agree. I think including our substitutes, for example, in our Heart of Brevard promotion, in any way that we can just make sure that we, whatever we are doing for teachers and other employees, we're doing for subs as well. So I appreciate all of your work on all of that. Are there any additional comments or questions for either Dr. Theddy or Mr. Savage? All right, then I think I am handing it back to Mr. Colucci for our third topic.
All right, thank you. Our next topic is health insurance. This is important to our district because premium, deductible, copay increases, and so on are detrimental to a workforce that is struggling with pay. Teachers and staff may be foregoing health care to save money. We don't have hard data on that, but through our conversations with teachers, we do feel like they are not taking advantage of the health care that's offered sometimes because they can't afford to. And moving on to the next slide. Just some little bit of background I wanted to include. One thing I've heard in the SIAC committee a few times is, hey, we haven't done anything in 5 years. And that is just not accurate. There's actually been a lot of changes to our health plan. Just so going back to 2015, there was a premium increase where employees increased their contributions by $35 and the board increased its contributions by $70. In 2015, we started requiring biometrics to try to keep the costs down. In 2016, 17, around there, we opened up the WellCare centers. And then 2019, there were formulary changes for prescriptions, spouse biometrics, flat pay for high-tech imaging, 30-day specialty drugs, voluntary 90 now, and we removed dispense as written. And then this year, which started in January, there was 11 changes to the plan in form of copay increases, deductible increases, out-of-pocket increases, and so on. So there have been many, many changes to the plan over the past 5 years. And then moving on to the next slide, what does this look like to BFT? Firstly, there is a lack of understanding about what a self-funded insurance plan is. Our teachers don't understand that the cost-saving measures that are put into place are about saving them money, that they are owners of our insurance plan. There's a lot of anger over changes and increases. That anger's, directed at BFT sometimes, the board, the superintendent, and I would say it's often misplaced anger because healthcare issues are a national issue, not a local issue. There's this belief that we don't have quote unquote good health insurance. That is inaccurate. Our insurance is on par with the rest of the school districts, and if you looked at the health insurance exchange, I believe we would have what's considered a gold plan for health insurance. There is confusion over these changes as to what's covered and what's not covered. Just recently, I ran into an example where a member had asked us on our Facebook page if x-rays were covered. I said, well, call Cigna. She called Cigna. Cigna said, no, x-rays are not covered. She asked me, does that seem right? I said, well, looking at the schedule of benefits, that does seem accurate. We had a bunch of members chiming in saying, no, x-rays are paid for. And then I talked to Mr. Langdorf, and he said, no, I think x-rays are paid for as well. So right now, I'm not sure if we pay for x-rays or not, but that is one of those examples where there's just a lot of confusion surrounding it. And that seems like a pretty basic question. So we have, some concerns about more complicated issues, the education surrounding that. And as I mentioned, we believe that there is some avoidance of health care to save the employees money. If you want to move on to the next slide. So this is a graph we created called projected trend versus actual trend. So the national trend line for health insurance is 6%. Although we did some digging on that, and we found that national trend line is actually inflated, and it is actually between 3.6 and 4.1%. And we believe that we shouldn't be so focused on the national trend as the trend that has existed in our plan over the last 9 years. So in 2019, our actual expenses to the health insurance plan were $71.9 million. If we would have followed this 6% trend line beginning in 2010, we would have believed the expenses to our plan would have been over $100 million. So let me say that again. If we would have followed the 6% trend line for the last 9 years, we would have believed our expenses would have been over $100 million, not $71.9 million. And if you actually break down this trend line over the last 9 years, we have data for, and average it out, it's actually less than a 2% per year increase, not a 6% increase. So we think it's important to look at more than the 1 year of data when we're developing a plan on how to tackle an issue. I mentioned this previously in our SIAC meeting. You know, we've seen many inaccurate projections of the trust fund balance. I went back into my notes as a SIAC committee member, and back in May 2018, there was a projected shortfall between $4.7 million and $12.1 million by the end of 2019. And that actual deficit is going to be, was less than 2.4 million starting in 2020, and by 2020 it will be $1.2 million deficit, or projected. We do understand that there is a projected shortfall for January 2021 of $10.9 million. We do realize that, you know, some sort of action, some sort of changes are going to happen to deal with a shortfall, although we do not think it's nearly going to be as big as what's projected. But one of the concerns we have is that BFT is not being given a clear target on how much are we trying to save, or how much revenue are we trying to increase for the plan. And it's hard to develop a plan if you don't know what the target is. Moving on to the next slide. In SIAC, we have been talking about some different solutions, and we want to let you know what we're comfortable with right now. There has been talk of a tobacco surcharge. We are comfortable with that. We want our employees to be healthy first and foremost, but also we believe that if you are unwilling to attempt to quit smoking, the data shows that you're costing the plan more money, so you should chip in more money for that. There were several different variations of the surcharge that were discussed, everything from an affidavit to a blood test and so on. We're comfortable with affidavit. We wouldn't want to get into blood test or saliva test or something like that. And I'd also like to mention that one of the options I saw with this is if an employee agrees to 3 coaching visits, they would not have to pay the surcharge. And by the way, the potential savings for the surcharge savings/revenue would be between $150,000 and $500,000. The dependent eligibility audit, we believe, is a no-brainer. We need to make sure that people who shouldn't be on the plan aren't, and if they are and there's an additional charge that we're asking for, that they should be paying it. So the potential savings on the dependent eligibility audit were between $200,000 and nearly $2 million. So there's a huge range of potential there. Next, we saw that Marathon believes if we increase coaching by 15%, that we could be saving the plan between $500,000 and $1 million a year. That's another no-brainer. Should be doing an all-out education effort to get people the coaching that they need for their own health and to save the plan about money. One of the constant themes in SIAC is revamping education about the plan. We really, I know Mark does a spotlight on benefits, and we share those. There are resources on the website, but we have to do more. We have to offer that information in more ways to employees so they take advantage of this, which will save the plan money and improve their health outcomes. One thing, for instance, where I feel like there's a lot of a lack of clarity is about our WellCare centers, right? So in one breath, we hear that the WellCare centers, well, they're not really for urgent care. They're more for coaching and some health visits. But at the same time, last year, we increased copays to the urgent care facilities using the rationale that employees could go to the WellCare centers, and we increased hours at the WellCare centers to accommodate for that. But then I'm still hearing, when we talked to Cigna just last week or so, well, no, they're not really for urgent care. Well, we said they were for urgent care when we increased the copays to the urgent care centers for our employees. And I've mentioned it too previously. Right now, it's a really unfair situation for our employees living on beachside and maybe in South Palm Bay to get to one of the WellCare centers. So they're being stuck instead of being able to get an office visit for free, they're being charged, I think it's $45, $50 for an urgent care visit. And then we want better buy-in by our leadership about the education and promoting it. From me, from administrators, from Dr. Mullins, from you guys as school board members, we all need to be promoting what our plan is offering. And we have created a timeline for consideration of a plan for 2022. Kyle was going to speak on that for a minute, if Kyle's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me, Anthony?
Yes.
So I think everybody on the call and everybody that's been involved, and every time I've sat at SIAC, would agree that there's an issue. There's going to be a funding issue. Now, we could disagree on the trend line, and I do think that's important because that really talks about how much of a hole we need to fill. But I think one of the things that's really important is that we don't rush into any decisions as the board, as an employer, BFT as our members. I think we owe it to everybody involved that we actually sit down and look at all the available information and we don't rush into anything. I believe one of the timelines that was talked about at the last SIAC meeting with the board members there was when open enrollment starts. When do we have to have these plan designs done by? When would we have to make some of these decisions if we were going to change open enrollment plans for October? And I believe we're really close in that time frame. We're probably within 30 to 60 days where there would be time to present plan changes. What are we going to do? And from attending the last SIAC, I don't think there's enough information to make a huge plan. So I think one solution that we could be comfortable with is if we all agree to some type of timeline for next year where we know we're going to have to make a plan change, or if we network, or we have to create the Cigna designated network. And we all agree on a set of dates, and it may be by December. SIAC will have a recommendation for the school board. The school board will give feedback to SIAC, and all the way through till by May or by April, BFT agrees, and whoever and 1010 agree that we'll go to the bargaining table just to talk health insurance. We understand compensation numbers may not be available next year this time, but we agree that there's a health insurance issue. We owe it to our members, and I feel like the board would owe it to their employees as well to move slowly about this. And if we're going to do any drastic changes, that we take our time and we make sure we're doing the right change and we're not just doing it because it sounds good and this is what we're going to rush to do right now.
Okay, next slide. So there are some solutions that seem promising, but we need more information on them. One of the solutions we've been talking about in SIAC is a dedicated care network savings through Cigna, which basically would offer cheaper co-pays to go to certain doctors within this network. And that could have the potential savings of $730,000. But the problem is we asked, it's already been a month, and we asked for a list of doctors in this network so we could eyeball it as well as for some kind of disruption report. And we still don't have that. So it's hard to judge the impact that would have on our employees. Next, want to talk a little bit about registered nurses for employees on some campuses. And Kyle's going to go ahead and talk about this.
So throughout our conversations with Cigna and at SIAC and with Marathon, we've all talked about how there, and Anthony just mentioned it a few minutes ago, about how there's a shortage or an inequity on the beach side for employees accessing the wellness clinics, or in South Palm Bay, where if you live in Titusville, Anthony can get to the wellness center in about 5 minutes, where, for instance, myself and Merritt Island would have to go all the way to Vieira to get to a wellness center. And one of the possible solutions, I think, would be adding more wellness centers, but from my understanding, the cost is between $500,000 and $600,000 the first year BPS would stand up a clinic. And I believe Mark has exact information. But another option that we found while discussing with Cigna and through Marathon and did some research on is there's ways we can either add a registered nurse or a nurse practitioner to available school space that we already have, that BPS already has. And what this would look like, from my understanding with Cigna, is a registered nurse can be in a vacant classroom, an extra office, with all the equipment that they would need to take your temperature, take your vitals, and some type of video solution where if they need to get a hold of a doctor, they can get a doctor on the video solution. But you could also go ahead and just get prescriptions. These people could be available at our schools for coaching, and the increase in coaching to help save money on the plan over the long term. And I feel like this may be an option where if the board's not comfortable spending $600,000 on one wellness clinic, we may be able to get 3 or 4 schools with available space and have a registered nurse or some type of nurse practitioner so that all our employees have the equal access to the healthcare, not just the ones that live really close to a wellness center. And I also feel like this would be an added benefit to our plan. And in return, it would probably help incentivize using fewer sick days. Like the substitute issue ties into this perfectly, the mental health issue. Like, what can we do to help our employees be as healthy as they can, come to school every day, be ready to teach, and just be ready to go? And I feel like this would be a really awesome incentive that we could give to everybody. Another thing we talked about, and I brought this up with Mark prior, is maybe some type of incentive for our employees that use the wellness care center. Maybe if they're able to get an appointment and they have to leave school for 30 minutes to use that appointment, they don't get charged sick time for the 30 minutes. Obviously, if they're going to be out the whole day, that's understandable that they're going to get charged sick time. But how can we incentivize using our welfare centers and using our available resources to help save the plan money? Because in the end, we all are responsible for the spending on the plan. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, another incentive we talked about was potentially offering employees some kind of discount or actual dollars in their paycheck for going to get a full wellness exam. We know that some of the school districts offer that as well. And in our talks with Cigna, they felt like a full exam was a much more effective way to save costs to the plan than just the biometrics. But there's also a host of other incentives that could be offered. Another possibility to fill this hole would be a board infusion into the trust fund. It's been done many times in the past. It hasn't for several years now. Just some things that we're looking at and we're aware of is Our teacher raises last year were projected to cost about $12 million. We've already requested payroll and figured out through the rest of the year. The cost was projected at $12 million. It's looking like those raises are only going to cost $6 million. So there'll be $6 million falling to the bottom line just from unused money for those employee raises. So the board could decide to use some of that. We know right now that with the schools working remotely, we are saving a ton of money on transportation savings. There's electric savings, and perhaps some of that money could be used to fill the hole, as well as we know that there is $19 million in the reserves for an emergency. Increasing contributions, both by the board and by the employee. Look, we're all nervous about what's going to happen in June and July when there's a special legislative session. But as it stands right now, we're looking at getting the pay up for many employees to $47,500, and our beginning pay is $39,226. So there are many teachers who may be looking at substantial raises. So if we had to do a small premium increase, a good raise year would certainly be the time to do it. At the same time, we're not quite sure what that raise is going to look like for our teachers making $47,500. So more than $47,500 or more. So we're not quite sure if it's going to be a decent raise year for them. So that remains to be seen. Like I said, we need more information, but that it has been 5 years since a premium went up. And as I mentioned earlier, last time the board contributed $70 per month per employee, and the employee contributed $35. And then moving on to our final slide about health insurance. We've been talking a lot about an alternative network in SIAC. And first of all, we don't think that the alternative network is a horrible idea or a bad idea, especially if this is something that could be offered to employees at no cost or low cost. But right now, we need to be realistic. There is no alternative network. As of last SIAC meeting, there was no alternative network, and we're being asked to consider something that doesn't even exist. There is no contract with Health First, but we're projecting an estimated savings of 10%. Well, how can we do that if we don't have a contract with Health First? We don't have a disruption report about what this might do to people who switch this plan. Would they be able to keep their doctor? Would they be forced to give up their doctor? We have our concerns with Health First to begin with. The union is looking at a potential lawsuit against Health First for monopolistic practices. They've already, that has been litigated in court already by other providers throughout the state, whether or not Health First was a monopoly here in Brevard County. Now, there's a lack of clarity about the savings on the alternative network, and by that I mean this: we don't understand at this point if the savings are coming through using that alternative network, or the savings are coming from jacking up the prices on the other plan. Are they savings, or are you just going to jack up the premiums for those that choose to keep the other plan? And then, as we've been talking about, this would be a major change, and we don't want to rush it. A lack of education is an ongoing theme. We'd have to educate all the employees about this alternative network. And that is what we have for health insurance.
Thank you, Mr. Colucci and Mr. Savage. Dr. Mullins, did you want to take lead on discussion on this? I know there's a lot of pieces there and probably won't be able to go into as much detail as we did on some of the other topics on some of those items, but.
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Belford. Well, I will take just a couple moments to make some comments and then turn it over to, I believe Mr. Langdorf is going to provide some information, some data. First, I want to just say I really appreciate the way the union has described or defined our health plan, because they said it's our plan. We are self-insured, which is absolutely correct. It is our plan. We are managing our own health plan as an organization. So ultimately, how we choose to utilize it, how we manage our own personal health, how we help each other understand our health plan and take advantage of the benefits, as well as utilize good, positive, healthy lifestyle practices, ultimately yields a double benefit to us as an organization as well as us personally. One, by making positive, proactive personal health choices, we live the benefit of a more healthy lifestyle. And then second, when we do that, it translates into financial benefits, both personally and for the plan. So I also appreciate Mr. Colucci or Mr. Savage, I don't remember who was talking about that, but a willingness to share in the communication and the education of our plan to our employees and to our insured, keeping in mind that we have approximately 6,500 employees that utilize our health plan, and of that we have over 11,000 who are included in the insured category of our plan. So communications, education, taking a proactive approach to both utilizing the plan and also managing our own personal health is a benefit to everybody on the plan. And like I said, will yield financial benefits. So I look forward to continuing to work with the union and our both BFT and our 1010 union and the BASA Association to really ambitiously educate and inform our employees, our insured folks, that of how we can all benefit from utilizing the things I've just mentioned. But I also, and Mark Mr. Langdorf may already have this on his list to mention, but I did want to bring to everyone's attention, there were questions raised in Mr. Colucci's presentation or support of a dependency audit. And that is actually already underway. Mr. Langdorf has secured services to do a dependency audit across the organization. The potential savings are unknown. There was quite a range there of the potential savings. So it all depends on what discoveries are made of who may be on the plan that shouldn't be, and those corrections being made. So I'm not sure, maybe Mr. Langdorf can provide a timeline on that, but that is already underway. We have also initiated a well care clinic audit. So we've had the clinics in place about four years now. Started with one and it's grown to the 3 sites. And there's been some discussion at SIAC around expanding the well care clinic sites. But there were questions raised around what is the savings? What is the benefit to the plan? We know that there's a benefit to service utilization and or convenience to our employees. But at a time where we really have to carefully measure benefit versus cost, where do our current well care utilization and services fall in terms of cost benefit analysis? So we have engaged RSM to conduct an audit of our well care clinics to determine what the financial benefit is and to provide that cost benefit analysis. In addition, we also have RSM conducting a pharmacy or a PBM audit. What that looks like is looking at doing a deep dive into our utilization of pharmaceutical services to ensure that we are receiving the full financial benefit of where prescriptions are being sent, how they're being filled, the rebates that we receive through that process. So those two audits, or three audits actually, could yield some financial benefits to the program. The pharmacy audit will take quite a bit longer than the WellCare clinic. I believe we're hopeful to have results of that by the end of May, which could translate into decisions on what is being made for the plans. And I want to close by agreeing with the union, having spent a lot of time with SIAC and reviewing our insurance conditions and plan and situation. We are at a place that financial action is going to be necessary to maintain the health and welfare of the plan, and appreciate the union coming alongside and engaging in that discussion and conversation. And we have a SIAC meeting coming up next week, so some of these additional suggestions or solutions can certainly be added to this discussion next week if they aren't already. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Langdorf. I think he wants to go over some data and information for the board as well.
Good afternoon once again. Just to answer a question from Dr. Mullins, we have selected the vendor that we want to do the dependent audit. We're trying to get a finalized contract. Once we get that, we will present it to the board for approval, because they were the best cost for the best audit, but because it's a cost to the district, that will have to go to the board for approval. So as soon as that contract is done, we will present it, and hopefully we can get that started as quickly as possible from there. I do want to bring your attention to this slide here, because I think there's some interesting things on here. And as I was asked to communicate with regards to the health insurance plan, I thought one of the best things to see is to have a touching point of how we compare to other districts. And so I asked Cigna to pull some data for me. And so what they did is you could see on this particular chart, you could see local school board A, B, and C. They don't want me to tell you who these school districts are, but I'm going to tell you that these are the three districts that touch us right to the west. So maybe as you look at some of those numbers, you can kind of figure out who they are, but they don't want me to say who they are. But I just think there's some interesting data points on here. If you looked on through the first area, I've highlighted three things that I think are important to look at when it comes to cost to our plan, and this is through December of 2019. You'll see that our medical plan spend per member per month. So basically what we do is we take the total spend on what has been spent on medical care, and we divide that by the number of employees per year. I shouldn't say member, it's not per member per month, it's per member per year. You can see that the medical costs to our plan are about $5,235.61 per member per year. If you look on the chart, that's lower than any of the districts that touch us, and it's actually lower than all of the school board norms. And the norms are basically Cigna's other school board clients throughout the state. So you can see with the school districts that touch us, we're in pretty good shape from a medical spend perspective. If you look below that, the pharmacy spend per member per year, we're not the lowest out of those, but we're pretty darn close and to school board C, and we're absolutely below the norm. So we're in good shape from a pharmacy spend when comparing others. But you look at the total plan spend per member per year, and we're basically $2,000 less than the norms, and we're below every single school district that touches us to the left, or to the west of the county. So I think we're in good shape. Another thing that I think is interesting for this particular chart, if you look at year over year total plan spend trend per member per month, our trend is about 4%. For those who are not sure what trend is, What that is basically how much the cost of medical and pharmacy is increasing each year. This past year, we had a higher trend than we normally have. It's usually somewhere between 2 and 3, but we had a 4% trend. But if you look on down the line through that comparison, the other school districts had a 5%, except for the one, School Board B, and they offer a clinic just like we do. So regardless of what happens, all of the numbers that I believe that fit in total plan spend per member per year, it's embedded the work that our clinics are doing, and I think that's keeping our trend lower than what it would be otherwise. Those other districts have Cigna as their third-party administrator, just like we do, and they run similar plans to what we do. Another thing that's interesting to look at on this particular chart is the catastrophic claimants. That is, they're spending greater than $1,000 per 1,000 members. We're averaging about 7.6, which is lower than all of the school districts that touch us as well. It's below the norm. So I think we've got some pretty good statistics there as far as our costs are concerned. Beth, if you'll go to the next page. Another thing that I asked Cigna to do was to give us an idea of how our employees are engaged in supporting the chronic conditions they have. And what's interesting from this stat that I think is interesting to point out is about 44% of our employees have a known chronic condition or more. So this is 44% of our employees have at least one chronic condition, and most of them have more than that. That's actually lower than the 3 districts that touch us to the west, but it's a little bit higher than the school board norms. If you look right below that, though, 73% of our employees with chronic conditions are engaged in some sort of health improvement through Cigna. And what Cigna designated as engaged is they've completed at least 1 or 2 activities during the year. And those activities could be lifestyle coaching. So if you deal with stress or weight loss, they will communicate with somebody by telephone and have those sorts of conversations. If for those of you who are on the plan, you might notice that you get lots of letters from Cigna. Every time you go to the doctor, you're going to get an explanation of benefits. But what Cigna also does is evaluate what the doctor designates you as having a problem with. So it could be weight loss, it could be smoking, it could be depression, any one of those things. They'll send a letter asking you to call them so they can help with that. Our well care centers does the same thing, but more of an in-person basis. But basically, when you get a call from Cigna, it's because they want to help with lifestyle coaching, wellness coaching, treatment supports for those who have specific chronic conditions such as diabetes or high blood pressure. Basically, if they do those sorts of things, they're considered engaged as far as Cigna is concerned. So you look at the depression, at 16.1% of our staff are identified as having depression, but 68.9% of them are engaged in some sort of program with Cigna. Weight complications, about 15.1%, but 81.2% of them are engaged with programs that Cigna offers, as well as our well care center. And all down the line, you can see how our employees are utilizing the health plan to make health improvements. But this is just Cigna's records. Our well care centers are doing those as well. The number of appointments for health coaching has increased dramatically there, and about 37% of our employees are getting continual coaching in our clinics. So I think we're seeing good numbers. Unfortunately, we have some other pressures on top of that, and it really comes down to what happens with our catastrophic claims. So, Beth, if you go to the next chart, I'll kind of describe what this is. Obviously, when you look at this is a history of our spend and our revenues with the Health Insurance Trust over the past 7 years. Well, it's just the past 6 years, 14 through 19. Because we're in the middle of 20 right now. But if you look at this and you look at the total revenue from 2015 to 2019, and this will continue into 20 because we're not getting any additional revenue into the plan. We basically have had flat revenues for that time period. I know there's a little bit of pricing fluctuation. Basically how that works is as people are on the plan or they come off the plan, the revenues only increase by the number of participants within the plan. So, but basically you could see there that we've gone 6 years with flat revenues. If you look at the expenses, our expenditures have increased from year to year, but the last 3 years you can see where we've had a really big increase, because in 2016 our medical costs went from 45 million to 52 million. If you look at 2018, they went to 51 million, and last year they went up to $54.5 million. In contacting or communicating with Cigna, they've indicated that most of all of the increase is coming from catastrophic complaints. And basically, the definition of a catastrophic complaint is an employee who needs extensive medical care and hospitalization to overcome the problem they're having. Typically, a catastrophic claims could be somebody who's in a coma, has cancer, suffers a stroke or diabetes that's out of control, has heart conditions, etc. Basically, I put a catastrophic claim as anyone who's not able to function normally in their work, to earn a living, and to meet their financial obligations. So that's how you would define a catastrophic complaint. And you could see from this chart, our pharmacy has been flat, the clinic costs are there, but what's increased has been those chronic conditions. Actually, in 2019, $25.4 million of our medical spent was spent on catastrophic claims. Some of those we can control, some of them we can't, but that's where the costs are happening within our plan. And actually, over the past 3 years, what we've lost from our health insurance trust fund is about $8.6 million over the past 3 years in that spend itself. We are meeting with SIAC to go over different things. We've had extensive meetings with the superintendent and others involved in the break since we've been on the COVID-19, but we are looking forward to meeting with the union as well as the rest of SIAC, more not as a union, but as a SIAC committee to come up with some solutions. And I hope that we're going to be able to start doing that as of next week during our SIAC meeting. But I wanted to give you an idea of what's happening with our health plan. And I'm open to any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins and Mr. Langdorf. Any questions for either side or comments? You guys are a really quiet group on that one. All right, then no questions on health insurance. Then I will give it back to Mr. Colucci for our final topic discussion, I think.
Okay, so our final topic is about recruitment and retention, and I'm going to turn this over to Vanessa Skipper and Jonathan Hilliard if their mics can be unmuted. Thank you.
I'm unmuted. Jonathan, are you there? So,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go. Okay.
We're going to focus on recruitment or retention, and I don't want to negate any of the recruitment activities that are currently happening in the district. I can say that it has been an extreme pleasure to work with Mr. Alba. We've gone to UCF to offer some professional development to the College of Education. We've done a second career educators Skype discussion, kind of like this, for people who are interested. And I do think that it's still important for us to keep our finger on the pulse of recruitment. But as you can see, the quote in front of you, often policymakers respond to teacher shortages by focusing on recruiting warm bodies to classrooms, even though improving retention is more critical to solving shortages in the long run. One reason for this approach is that teacher turnover is often an invisible problem whose real costs are unknown to parents, the public, and the policymakers themselves. So if we could go to the next slide. The research used here came from a few different places. This particular graph came from the Economic Policy Institute. And this is in the first report. They did a whole series called The Perfect Storm in the Teacher Labor Market. And there's 4 major reports, and I will be happy to send out the links to everything from that as well. If you look at this, it's pretty easy to read. You have the projected demand for new hires, the actual demand for new hires, and then light blue and dark blue is projected estimated supply, and then estimated supply. And that is from the school years of 2004, I believe, 2004, 2005, to the 2024-2025 school years. And I wanted to kind of look at it on a national level, and then of course we'll look at it a little bit closely as to what it means for us at BPS and BFT. But we know that when you are trying to get teachers to teach for you, if they're leaving for either other professions or they're leaving for other areas in the state or the country, that makes it worse for you. We also know, the colleges of education are disappearing around the country, or kind of combining with others. The teacher shortages it has serious consequences. We've got a lack of sufficient qualified teachers that threatens a student's ability to learn. Instability in a school's teacher workforce negatively affects student achievement and diminishes teacher effectiveness and quality. We know that the teacher shortage obviously has a more negative effect on schools in poverty. And I believe that teachers who teach in our lower socioeconomic areas and teachers who teach in our higher need schools, it's more important, not that the other schools aren't important, but it's so important for teachers to be able to build roots in those schools, to earn the trust of the community, to be able to teach multiple siblings, to be able to teach generations. And I think that retaining teachers in all schools is important, but especially in our lower socioeconomic areas. Higher teacher turnover consumes economic resources through costs of recruiting and training new teachers, and the teacher shortage makes it more difficult to build a reputation for our profession as a whole. And if we can't build a positive reputation or build ourselves as professionals, then that's going to perpetuate the shortage. Next slide. This slide kind of gives us a look at teachers who left our district in the school year 2019. We do have 2020's data up there, but if we look at the top line where we have contract expired 118, and then on the other side contract expired 26, that number is definitely higher now. I don't know if anybody might have it quite, because I know all principals were supposed to give out reappointment letters by last Friday. So if we're looking at the school year 19, I just want to grab a few numbers because I'm going to refer to them in some other slides. So contract expired, that's 118. So these would be the teachers that were non-reappointed to their schools. In Florida, we have the law and the instructional staff that basically they can be let go without any reason within the first year of employment. So I believe those numbers reflect that. Then the next one that I want to focus on is the resignation for other personal reason. That's 254 teachers in 18-19 who resigned for some reason. Often the teachers are not always forthcoming about that reason, just because They sometimes need a reference for, whatever other job they're going to get, whether it's in teaching or a completely different profession. But we're looking at a grand total of 538 teachers who, for some reason or other, in categories that I think, we can work on together, coming up with some solutions to get them to stay. So the 538 number is going to be important. The next slide, slide 27, gives us an idea of what the estimated cost to BPS of losing 538 teachers per year, $5,918,000. If we could at least cut that number in half, we would save $2,959,000. The link that you see below there is the Learning Policy Institute, and I can send that out as well to everybody. But basically, it has a calculator where you can type in the number of teachers that you lost, and it will estimate what the cost to the district is because of training, recruitment, etc. Slide 28, why do teachers leave? So the big three reasons, I've got 4 things up here, big 3 reasons that we've kind of identified, and not only have we identified it, but the major studies that were done by the Learning Policy Institute, the Economic Policy Institute, NPR, and some other reputable sources, all say compensation, lack of teacher preparation because training and mentoring matter, and the teaching working environment. But I put the bullet up there that says more than half of teachers do not feel supported and 1 in 4 quits as a result. Now that's national data. So looking at all of the trends and these reports, that's what the national reports are saying. But if you look at the number of teachers we had last year, and you take half of that, and then you take 1 in 4 of that half, or you take about 25% of that half, we're teetering between 1 in 5 and 1 of 6 of our BPS teachers either quitting or leaving. And so I just want to work together to come up with some ways that we can stop this from happening, that we can keep our teachers teaching. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So compensation, obviously, teachers in districts with stronger salary schedules are much less likely to leave their schools or the profession than in teachers in districts with poorer pay scales. We obviously are up against some things that are out of our control, as in, legislation, Senate Bill 736, but we've got to be able to bring some stability to compensation for our teachers. They can't count on raises year by year right now that keep up with inflation and the cost of living. And that's leading to them choosing other professions. Teachers often call our office to let us know that they are leaving the profession. I would like you all to know that I try to talk them out of it, but I also understand where they're coming from, because when I first started teaching, that's, I definitely looked at the pay scale. I looked at where I might be, and that's been kind of ripped out from underneath educators within the last 15 years. Next slide, please. On this one, I just went through the pay for performance history, and I debated on whether or not I was going to put the pay freezes on there, but I decided just to start with this. This is the what we've had to deal with over the years, and I just wanted to spot like some of the yo-yos. 980 to 2400, 581 to 875, 1100, 2000. If you're a particular teacher who maybe didn't had a year where they struggled and wasn't rated highly effective, or perhaps you're a teacher who had to take an FMLA or some sick leave that was extended and you didn't get a qualifying evaluation. There are some teachers that have missed out in the years where we've had these bigger raises. Some possible solutions to this, I know we can't negotiate, next slide, would be obviously predictable raises that keep up with inflation and cost of living. Again, I know, this is not a bargaining session and we have to negotiate, but I did put an example there. If we had something like a minimum amount of like $1,000 per year for effective with more to be negotiated, teachers could actually make plans for the future. We've talked about it before. Raises affect more than just that particular year. It affects it year after year going into our FRS, our retirement, which is important. And we're seeing even more so now as people are watching their 401ks jump up and down and go all around with everything that's happening. It's important for our teachers to feel solid in not only their current compensation, but in their futures for retirement. All right, next slide, please. So what does teacher preparation look like to BFT? Training and mentoring matter. Right now, we believe that there's not enough district mentors to effectively reach our teachers who need them. Our mentors at the district level, we believe are awesome. We believe that they are working so hard to reach the teachers that they need to reach, but we believe that we should have some more. And also in that vein, they need to have the ability to effectively model for teachers. And if they're spread very thin, sometimes that's not always possible. Jonathan, will you hop in and talk about school-based mentors?
Yeah, the school-based mentor, just like Vanessa was saying, they need to have that time and opportunity to come in, model, mentor, cultivate the relationship with the teacher that's going through this training period. This is an extremely difficult challenge when they already have a full caseload, an academic caseload. And if you look at it, many of our school-based mentors, the reason why they were chosen as a school-based mentor was because of their leadership. So they're not just doing mentoring of rookie teachers, but they're also on SAC committee. They're participating in other leadership situations within their school. So their plates are extremely full. And each one of those demands, is obviously very important to the school and to the overall success. But when we're talking about mentoring our new teachers, that's a different priority, and it's going to require more time. And I don't know if that's going to be with changing of schedule or what have you. I know Vanessa's going to get into that, but they need to have that time to come in and model with the new teacher. You got to think of it like an apprentice program. It's not a intern program, but our new teachers, they are the primary teacher for those students. So it's not like they can disengage at any time like an intern does. Those new teachers, they're in there 100% of the time. And so their mentor needs to be able to shadow right behind them, especially at those struggling times in the beginning of the year, different transitions throughout the year. So school-based mentors are very, very important to the overall success of our new teachers. Go ahead, Vanessa.
So next slide, please. This is just expanding this a little bit more. And I've kind of already said we need more district mentors. We need our mentors to have the ability to not just mentor, but model. And, you know, sometimes, again, there's a pretty good study out there called The Good Mentor, and it talks about the difference between, you know, mentoring and modeling and actually teaching. And I really think if we had the opportunity to have our first year teachers or our early career teachers to have a mentor in their classroom modeling and coaching once every couple weeks, and not just meeting with the teacher, but actually modeling the lessons. I know obviously everything that I'm talking about comes with a price tag, but I think if you look at how much it's costing us to lose teachers, I think it's important to think about investing that money instead and keeping them. In Minnesota, their model is to the mentors come out of the classroom and they do, I believe in Minnesota it's 3 years, and in some other districts I've heard about it, it's 5 years. So they actually come out of the classroom, they mentor for that amount of time, and then they go back into the classroom. And John, I think you had a pretty good analogy for that. So
yeah, I mean, you got to think about it like a Major League Baseball player. They can be one of the most successful baseball players in the game, but once they're out of the rotation for whatever reason, it takes some time to get their timing back because they're just not at that level of performance. I take myself as an example. I was out of the classroom directly for 6 years. I was in Title I. I was doing a lot of leadership capacities within the school. And then when I went back into the classroom, I realized there's a lot of just little idiosyncrasies that you can't teach in a workshop. You can't do it in a one day, oh, this is a wonderful lesson, use this lesson kind of training. Transitions between activity to lunch, how to balance struggling students while you're teaching, your tier 1 students, parents, and all of the things that successful teachers innately juggle. A lot of people like to say it's common sense, but really it's experience. It's experience, it's wisdom, it's being in multiple situations and having that bag of tools or tricks that becomes a plethora of opportunities and resources. And the only way you get that is by being in the classroom. In the 6 years that I was out, when I came back in, think about the new things that our district has been exposed to. iReady, Success Maker, iExcel. We've changed various reading and math curriculums. We've instituted some wonderful strategies, collaborative planning. All of these things affect the success of how that teacher organizes and juggles all of these various different programs and priorities and people that are involved in their classroom. So having someone who stays in that capacity for an extended length of time, they miss all of those different changes because our profession is very fluid. It's not just a science, but there's an art aspect to it. And being out of that sequence for 10, 15 years, you lose a really big piece. And I can honestly say it's taken me, I've been back in the classroom now for 6, 7 years. And I'm just now really starting to go, okay, yeah, I've got my chops the way I used to have it. Because each year there's always something new. And you can't use everything that you used last year because you got a new set of kids this year and a new set of curriculum parameters. And so it just really lends itself that you got to get back in the game to understand really what's going on. So when you come out and you're that leader, that mentor, you have real-time tactics to teach and model to our new teachers. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Thank you, Jonathan. So, and with the school-based mentors, I obviously, I think school-based mentors are important. I learned most of what I know about what is good teaching from somebody who wasn't necessarily assigned to me as a mentor, but some people who I collaborated with and worked with. But our school-based mentors have a huge workload. So I don't know if some solutions would be to reduce their workload on their campus, maybe increase the supplement. But really, when it comes down to it, we have a situation right now with a teacher who was non-reappointed, and she got an email from her teacher mentor, because I think something must have gone out for supplements, that said, can you pick a date and fill this out and say that we met and send it back to me? And that happens more often than we'd like to say that it happens. And I don't want to knock on this particular mentor teacher at that school level, but teachers are overwhelmed. So when you add the mentoring aspect on top of it, this teacher who was in her first year teaching, was non-reappointed at her school, did not have the access to the mentor that she needed. And this is happening more often than we think it is, or more often than anybody will say it is. And it's just something that we need to collaboratively address together. There is a teacher mentor preparation program out of Pinellas County, and I'm not sure we have been invited to go tour the program. We don't know, take a team from the district and BFT, go over there and visit for a day. They're not sure what it's going to look like now because it takes place over the summer. Just because of COVID-19, and they're not sure that they're going to actually be able to do it. Springboard to Success was born out of first a Bill Gates Foundation grant, and so for the first 2 years of its existence was funded that way, but Pinellas County found it to be so valuable that they kept it going. It was a partnership with both Pinellas County and Pinellas County Teachers Association, which is their BFT. And basically they have two cohorts, one in June, one in July. They have, in the morning, they come together and with a mentor teacher. So the mentor teacher and the early career teacher are getting paid. So in the morning, they come together, they have a lesson rehearsal, then they plan. Then they get kids who are participating in summer school program, but they're actually teaching class like they normally would be. And then they do summer school with their teacher coach, modeling, planning, teaching together. And then in the afternoon, they have professional development together. And then they apply that again the next day. And so they do this as part of their summer school program for the students who need to be in school. I believe part of this was probably born out of, you guys may have remember when their schools were labeled failure factories. And so this has been something where they've kind of done in response, but they've had a great success with it, because it's more than just an intern out of a college program. It's somebody that the district has hired that they're paying over the summer, along with a teacher mentor to go through it. In addition, the teacher mentors go through a 20-hour coaches training where they actually go through a coach's role and they get professional development for it. It's an amazing program. I hope at some point we do get to visit the program. If it's done as a whole this summer. If not, they plan on doing something online. They don't know what it looks like, but they will let us know. All right, next slide, please. So teacher work environment. So what do teachers value? And this, again, this looks like us to BFT, but as you go through the studies by the Learning Policy Institute, the Economic Policy Institute, some information from NPR, teachers want to feel that their input is valued and they want the opportunity to teach freely and creatively. They also feel like they are bogged down with obsessive test and data requirements. And just to, and we appreciate that this has been kind of made voluntary, but just as an example, the spreadsheet teachers were sent to track their data for online learning had 17 columns on it. And, it was for data that they could access through things like Performance Matters and other reporting systems. NPR did an interview about this with a teacher that left, and here's what she had to say. She said, education has been test and data obsessed. The schools are being run a little bit more like on a business model of constantly collecting data, and then that's driving all of our decisions. It's a shift, she says, that eroded emphasis on the craft of teaching and seeing students as individuals. I can't see that kid who walks through my door who didn't have breakfast or whose parents just got divorced and think that his number on his latest test is the most important about that child that day, she told us. Peyton remembers a 4th grade girl who in the middle of a week-long bout of testing put her head down on her desk. I said, "Are you okay?" Peyton recalls. And she said, "Mrs. Peyton, this just isn't fun anymore." That stuck. It was haunting me, she says. I just keep hearing, "This isn't fun anymore. This isn't fun anymore. And these are kids." I think there is an important distinction between using data effectively, because I do believe that we need to use data to drive our decisions, but I think that we have started to use it to the detriment of children, to the detriment of creativity in the classroom, to the detriment of our profession as a whole. So I really think that it would behoove us to take a good look at what is required and what isn't required, and give some teachers a little bit more freedom in their classroom. Next slide, please. So this was the other thing that national studies supported as well, and I just have a few examples from situations that have happened this year that I think add to teachers feeling not supported and teachers leaving, going all the way back to that slide where we talked about 1 in 4 nationally. More than half of teachers don't feel supported, and of those half, more than 1 in 4 quit. And the trend for us is between 1 in 5, 1 in 6, looking at that 538 number roughly. So here's what teachers want in an administrator. They want administrators who are flexible and not rigid in beliefs or expectations. Administrators can make or break morale at schools. I had a situation this year where an administrator tried to write a teacher up who put a few blue highlights in her hair. That is obviously the style now. I'd be hard pressed to go to any school in this district that doesn't have someone who has done that. I tried to see it from the administrator's perspective, so I reached out to some other administrators and asked them how they felt about it, including an administrator who came from a pretty much exactly similar school. And when I asked the other administrator, that person said, when the teacher put color in their hair, at first I thought about saying something, but then I remembered what a great teacher that teacher is. And when I brought that up to the administrator who was trying to write this particular teacher up, he said, "Oh, this teacher is great. We love this teacher, highly effective, all these things," but was willing to sever the relationship. And given some situations that have happened after that, with email exchanges that I've been on, definitely has severed that relationship with that teacher. We still have teachers asking about the first Wednesday of the month being Jeans Day because their administrator told them they couldn't wear them because that was a policy under Blackburn, even though Dr. Mullins continued that. So we have to dig out the memo from the leadership team packet and send it out. And then the other common complaint that we have is that administrators only choose certain people to give input on school programs and decisions. And again, when you're going back to the data and the national research, teachers are leaving because they don't feel that their opinion matters. So some solutions that we have on the next slide is maybe that we can work together and get some principles that are identified by BPS and BFT to publicly share, you know, on social media or in whatever other means that we decide what they're doing with their fellow schools and with our community. I know that we have some principals that the only things we hear about from their school are positive things, and that's amazing. We have some schools that we hear nothing out of, and you know, and then we have some schools that just take up our entire call log and our time because of administrative concerns. Some suggestions, maybe some more mentoring for administrators from those administrators who are getting it right. And then lastly, and this kind of goes along with, you know, kind of the genes or the different hair colors, just some more awareness on generational diversity between what our workforce is starting to look like now and maybe what our workforce used to look like. And obviously we want to be a partner with that, with you guys on this, with everybody, because if we have happy teachers stay. Happy teachers aren't calling the BFT office on Friday afternoons, crying their eyes out, and obviously maybe we reduce the mental and emotional health concerns as well. And obviously on the end, on the last slide, I know you guys have all heard me say this, and again, I do not want to discount the efforts of recruitment by the district. I believe that, you know, it is important for us to stay in touch with our colleges of educations, but our colleges of educations are going away because they don't have the enrollment that they used to have. So we have to focus on recruitment. I mean, you have to focus on retention, I'm sorry, because you don't have a recruitment problem if you don't have a retention problem. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Skipper. Dr. Thuddy, did you want to respond on this one, or?
I actually have Mr. Alva set up to respond, and I'm going to turn it over to him in just a second.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Alva. So hopefully you can hear me as Dr. Theddy gets ready for this part of the presentation. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Well, I'd like to give a thank you to you know, Vanessa, Skipper, and then the BFT team for putting a great presentation together with the retention piece. Certainly, I am in 100% agreement with the importance of retention and making sure that we're providing the adequate support to the teachers we already have in our district. And then hopefully, by supporting them, we will have to recruit as many teachers as we do each year. But certainly, you know, I want to, you know, there have been some new work, different kind of work with the recruitment efforts. So I will spend a few slides just talking about how the recruitment efforts have kind of changed, especially in the light of recent events such as our COVID-19 challenge, and kind of the work that we're doing there and just to promote our jobs. And then we'll finish up with kind of our efforts with retention and hopefully address some of the concerns that the BFT brought up, and certainly maybe opportunities for us to partner together for that retention piece. So in our first slide here is just kind of talking about our two recruiting fairs that we had for Brevard Public Schools. The first one is probably you are aware of, normally our annual career fair that we've had at your high school the last couple of years. it was scheduled to be held on March 23rd. That was the Monday after spring break. So as you can imagine, we had to quickly transition that fair from a face-to-face fair to our virtual fair. Thankfully, we had already kind of been working for a few months with various vendors on coordinating our first virtual fair, which was actually supposed to be today. And it is actually happening today. It just now is our second virtual fair. But we have principals right now as we speak interviewing candidates through this virtual platform. But because of the work that we had already done for setting up the April 21st fair, it wasn't quite the challenge of transitioning the face-to-face fair on March 23rd to the virtual platform, because we had already done a lot of the pre-work ahead of time. So it just took a few emails to the vendor. They were quick to respond. A huge shout out to 11 principals that responded very quickly and said they were on board, try this. During their spring break, they had to volunteer for training, to get training on how to utilize the platform. And we ended up having 115 candidates that had originally signed up for the face-to-face fair participate in the virtual fair. And throughout the day and that initiative, we ended up assigning 47 binders, which just so happens to be a few more binders that we issued on last year's face-to-face fair. So we were very pleased with the results for our first kind of effort into the virtual fair initiative through Brevard Public Schools. So today, as I just said, we have our second fair now, and we have principals right now participating in those. So just kind of, you've never participated in a virtual fair, just really quickly, how it works is that, we have a kind of a landing page that candidates can go into. So on that landing page, we make sure that there's some strong resources that they have available to them as far as videos or written documents, brochures, just so they have an opportunity to learn about our district and what we have to offer, and certainly share and express to them kind of our culture and positive environment to work that we have in our schools in our district. And from there, then they are invited to then have video interviews with principals. So they have the opportunity to have one-on-one interviews through video platform with the principals that are on this call. They can post their resumes, so it's been a great platform to kind of help connect candidates with principals for the schools. So as of yesterday, and this is not even including the binders that we're probably issuing today, we had 52 individuals that were offered district level binders, and out of those, 20 have secondary certifications, because I know that was a concern, and it's a target area for our department, is to ensure that we're ensuring that the people that are middle school or high school certified have the opportunity to apply for these positions, and we're reaching out to those individuals, since many of the education preparatory programs in universities and colleges are transitioning to only elementary. So we've been making a really targeted approach to making sure that our secondary folks will have some individuals to choose from when they end up getting the binder list, when they can start advertising jobs here in May. And from that, we also, we don't want to just focus on teachers. So in the summer, we are going to work with other departments to see if they're interested in having a virtual fair for support staff. So that could be maybe educational technology, maintenance, facilities, or finance. So I'll reach out to those departments to see who would be interested, to see if this kind of platform will help fill their needs. All right, next slide. And here are some just other efforts that we've been doing. I selected the Bethune-Cookman College Visit because I think this is kind of a model to what we're trying to do in our Recruitment and Retention Department. First of all, we chose a university that has a high level of minority students. So we want to ensure that our recruiting efforts is trying to assist us in closing the gap between our percentage of minority students and making sure that the percentage of teachers or staff at their school is also aligned with that percentage. So that's been an initiative. And also, we want to target colleges that, again, have secondary individuals that could teach in our secondary schools, that have secondary certifications in those areas. So earlier this year, Latasha Bowens, the principal at Madison, agreed to go with me to the visit. And kind of what we do, and this is kind of our game plan, is we try to get our foot in the door any way we can to get in front of those students. We take advantage of. So we were invited to talk to science majors. These students weren't even in necessarily education students. There's maybe only one or two. Most of them were just getting degrees in biology or chemistry. And we had the opportunity to go in there to talk to them about resume writing and interview tips. So through those conversations, we were able to discuss with them opportunities within our district. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to replicate that kind of visit to other colleges, not necessarily just go there trying to recruit, because I think it's difficult to necessarily get your foot in the door through that approach. But how can we align with the school's needs, whether it's talking about professionalism, whether it's talking about ethics in the workplace, resume, interview tips, those kind of things. They're welcome to have us come in. And through those initiatives, we can plant the seed with those students that if they hadn't been thinking about education, then there's a way and a platform, if they have a bachelor's, to get them in the classroom. And it also it just builds those connections so that when they do have an actual recruiting event at the college, they've already been thinking about our district, and we have those connections with them. So as we go on, throughout the summer and then the fall, we're going to continue to reach out to more and more colleges to try to get those visits prior to those career fairs. The next couple of bullets you had to see there about UCF, and Vanessa mentioned this. She's one of the individuals that attended one of the Ed Night talks, and that occurs in the evenings. So we talk on different topics like classroom management, and I have individuals from Leading and Learning. The resource teachers have been able to come. People from my department have been able to come. And again, it's just opportunity to connect with those students and just making sure that Brevard County is still in their mind when they're thinking about where they want to commit to teaching and to start their career, that Brevard County is on their radar and they know what we have to offer, and especially what kind of supports that we provide to the new teachers. Vanessa also mentioned some of the webinars we've been creating. Again, it's just opportunities for individuals to get more information about our district. To ask candidates to complete our Beacon application, which could take 45 minutes, maybe an hour, without giving them any information about our district and get them excited about working for Brevard, I think is a challenge. So we're trying to find ways to connect with them, either through pictures or videos, in order to get them engaged and get them excited enough to then take that next step to maybe complete a district online application. With our addition of a second recruiter, thanks to some Title II funds, we've been able to really ramp up our efforts with branding various career pages on social media. So we have now career pages solely dedicated for job postings and just kind of showcasing our culture in our district on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So hopefully we'll be able to use those platforms to kind of get the word out, and not only what our current jobs are, but again, what makes Brevard County a special place to work. And just working with the two recruiters just to make sure that we have a proactive recruitment calendar for the entire year. And it's not only just the season we're in right now, which is very busy with job fairs and so forth, but it really is a year-long effort. And what can we do in the summer and in the fall when we're not necessarily going to career fairs, but what kind of work can we do in order to, again, create those strong relationships with universities to make sure that we have ongoing face time with those students. Next slide. This is kind of our next kind of initiative that we're trying, and again, it's why are we doing this kind of on-demand interview? It's an opportunity to provide greater connection with the candidates. There's many candidates out there that are kind of passive. They might be looking for a job or might be interested to see what other districts have to offer, but they might not necessarily be that engaged or that committed to, again, fill out a beacon application or send out requests for references. So this is a way for them to kind of connect with us in a very informal manner, where they can just get on their cell phone or on their computer and quickly answer a few questions, and then principals then can log into this site and again kind of hear what these people have to say, and if they're interested in them, they can reach out to these candidates and say, hey, I've got a job opening coming up. I saw your video interview, and I think you'd be a great fit. I encourage you to apply to this position. So again, it's just an opportunity to provide connections with principals and maybe even hiring managers in other departments to connect with individuals and make it kind of an informal platform for them to kind of get to know each other before they get to more of a formal interview process. So we're really excited about this this initiative. So here is kind of a sample of what you see here. So poor Bridget Reed, she's one of our district mentor teachers. So she agreed to be one of the guinea pigs, and so there's her picture. So she's up there for the world to see as far as what it looks like. If I'm the hiring manager, I get to see a picture of them, and then you get to see the questions that they're responding to on the right-hand side. And so we have the opportunity to kind of pick and choose the questions that we want to ask the candidates. And I think it's going to be a great way for principals or hiring managers to be able to kind of pre-screen candidates to see if they're going to be a good fit for their school. And I think it's going to be a great time saver for them as well, other than just having to look through resumes and all that. You can get to know a lot about a candidate just through a 5 or 10 minute video interview. So we're in the process to see how we link this opportunity with our current beacon system or maybe our website, how we can get this in front of our candidates that are applying for jobs. All right, next slide. Some other just kind of initiatives that we've done. So besides our 2 virtual fairs that we're hosting this month, we've also attended other virtual events. So we're, it's not our event, but we're just participating in as a vendor, as a table or a virtual booth. And it's interesting, kind of, we're just, again, getting to get familiarized with this platform and what candidates that attend these virtual fairs are kind of looking for. And, just kind of some of our first impressions through attending several of these events is that candidates that are going to these kind of virtual fairs where there's lots of school districts or companies at these fairs, they're not necessarily looking for maybe a face-to-face interview. They're just kind of going around and gathering information. So it's been a great platform for us to share all the great things that we have to offer within Brevard County. But then also invite them to our own virtual fairs. And then that way gives them an opportunity to interview with some of our principals. So we'll kind of continue with that pattern because it seems to be working well. Like I said, for the job fair today, I think we had we had 103 registrants, and out of those, we had 50 of those people were from out of state. So we're reaching people that we wouldn't necessarily reach if we just continue to do face-to-face fairs. So again, hopefully we're finding great candidates not only in Florida and in our district, but also around the country to get the best candidates we can for our schools and our students. We're using other kind of platforms, Frontline to Education, Glassdoor, Indeed. Again, other ways that we can get the word out not only about our job openings, but about our district and what Brevard County has to offer and as far as lifestyle and all those things that are important for job seekers to look for. So again, we're not counting on just somebody hearing about Brevard County. We're not counting on them just to take the step to fill out a beacon application and then apply for jobs. I think those days are long gone, and we have to find ways to connect with candidates through other platforms, and then through those connections, they'll take the step to apply for those positions to increase the number of candidates that we have applying for our jobs. So Title II has been huge for us. So thank you, Leading and Learning, Dr. Sullivan and Jane Klein. They've really made this a priority. There's lots of great things that they can spend the Title II money on, but they have really seen this and been great partners with us to find ways to use those Title II funds for recruitment and retention. One of those is the stipends for college interns. So we're offering $1,500 for college interns to intern within our district. So we're hopefully that through this, when UCF Orlando heard about this, they were incredibly excited about that opportunity. So we're hoping that we're going to get more individuals interning that are outside our county that necessarily wouldn't first think of Brevard County to do an internship. The PDCP program, that's our alternate certification program. Again, that used to be a cost to these teachers that are on our temporary certificate and need to complete certain courses to get their professional certificate after 3 years. This is now free to completers, and it used to cost them $1,200, and that's also funded through Title II funds. So that's a great recruitment incentive for them, because a lot of districts are still paying candidates to go and get their professional teaching certificate. Handshake and other virtual platforms are what we're using, and through Handshake, I think we did we sent out messages to 350 colleges and inviting them to our virtual fair today. So it's been a great platform, and then we had reached over 7,600 candidates through frontline education through those new recruiting platforms. So again, we're doing all we can to get the word out for the fairs, and it seems to be paying off with the number of candidates that we have participating in our fairs. Lastly on this slide, and the last time I presented to the board, we talked about the IA to teacher pipeline. So we have myself and my department, and then with Eastern Florida and the UCF Brevard campus, the three of us have met 3 different times throughout the year. We held one meeting with IAs in the evening. That was on November 21st. We had a strong turnout of IAs, and I believe the reason we had a strong turnout is because we sent invitations to each school to their principals, and then we asked the principals to hand deliver those invitations to their IAs. And I believe that is why we had such a strong turnout for an evening event, is that they received that personal invitation from their principal, that they took the time to invite them and encouraging them to take the steps necessary to become a teacher. So that was, we were really happy to see the turnout there, and again, a big shout out to the principals to take that extra effort and initiative to invite those people to that evening. We've also been, sending the IAs emails as far as, upcoming. In February, we sent them all an email saying, these are the upcoming registration dates for Eastern Florida or UCF, and these are the recommended courses that they are suggesting that you take if you're either pursuing an IA or a bachelor's degree. Again, we wanted to try to take as many steps away from them as possible, as far as them having to research, who do they contact, what classes do they take. So we're getting that information in front of them in order to help them just kind of navigate through the process of earning their AA or bachelor's, so that we can eventually get them to be a classroom teacher. Next slide. This is the second year that we've had a general knowledge test workshop. This is one test that teachers need to pass in order to earn their professional teaching certificate. And it's typically the math section that causes some concern or frustration on our teachers on a temp cert. So we've partnered with a vendor called Learning Liaisons. And last year we had, it's a 2-night, 4-hour each night commitment on these candidates. It's free of charge if they attend. Again, we're using Title II funds to pay for this vendor to provide the service. And the last 2 years, we've gotten great feedback from the participants that it has been helpful for them, and they feel confident moving forward to pass the test. The teacher networking events and lead mentor newsletter. again, these are going to more of the concerns that Vanessa had brought up as far as retention efforts. We, kind of also done our research, what do teachers want? What do teachers are looking for? And especially for the new teachers, they're looking for a way, not only to get professional development, but find connections with other teachers within their school, but also maybe within the district. So we understand that getting people together is very important for these teachers to feel like they're valued, they're seen, and that they feel like they're not alone. And that's going to help them through those first difficult years of teaching, as we're kind of learning. They're learning the ropes. They're building on their toolbox to help support their students. The Lead Mentor newsletter, this is something that Bridget Reed has been doing. It's a monthly newsletter that goes out to all of our lead mentors. Every school has a lead mentor coordinator that assists their assistant principal in ensuring that all their new teachers have a mentor assigned to them, and that they're meeting when they're supposed to be meeting regularly. So hopefully those stories, like the one that Vanessa highlighted, is decreasing as far as the number of new teachers saying that they are not receiving the support. We're providing that ongoing communication with the lead mentors. So just as far as some metrics, in the last newsletter that Bridget sent out in April, it had over 879 views. So those lead mentor teachers were getting them, they're looking at them, and they're also sending them and passing them along to their mentor teachers within their school, so that they have continued support of what are some best practices as far as how to help their new teachers. So it's been very well received, again, trying to support our new teachers. In the TLC conference, it's, Vanessa talked about some teacher leadership opportunities. So this is a great opportunity for teachers to step up and feel like they're valued, that, they were recognized for the work that they've done, and that other people could benefit them from hearing from what they're doing in the classroom. So we had over 138 teachers attend this event. It was on a Saturday, and it was a conference, 4 teachers led by teachers. So it was incredibly exciting that, they had really, it was all on them. They did it themselves, and that many teachers wanted to participate on a Saturday to hear more about what's happening in other teachers' classrooms was very positive. We received great feedback from that event. The teacher wellness event, we had talked a little bit earlier during this webinar about the importance of not only student wellness, but teacher wellness. So we created a kind of workshop, and this happened at Bureau High School. It was after work, and we had 45 teachers participate in this event. So they talked about nutrition, mindfulness, breathing techniques, fitness, brain-friendly movements for classroom, and kind of help their students. Great positive response for this event. And then teacher leadership opportunities, the clinical educator training, and this is a 20-hour training that we host for our mentor teachers. You can't be assigned a new teacher if you haven't gone through this training. So this provides them with the just research-based practices on how to truly support their new teachers. What do they need? How to give feedback in a positive way. So it's providing those teachers, those mentor teachers, what they need in order to support those new teachers. The Teacher of the Year Roundtables and Summit, again, it's an opportunity for teachers to kind of get together and just share best practices of how they can best support the teachers and initiatives in their school. We also have, which is not listed here, we do have a lead mentor roundtable as well. Again, it's an opportunity for our mentors to kind of hear from other schools. What are you doing? What supports are you providing your new teachers that's been meaningful and helpful? They can learn from one another how to best support their schools. As far as retention goes, the best retention effort we can do are what's happening at the individual schools. What kind of supports are they receiving from their individual mentor, and what kind of school-wide supports do they have in place? And a lot of that work is done through their school-based mentors or their lead mentor program. So we highlight those schools that are model programs so that other schools that maybe need a little extra direction or not sure where to go, they have a place to go to hear from some excellent schools doing great work to support their new teachers. My next slide. And, Vanessa had mentioned our district peer mentor teachers. So we had changed kind of the way they were doing their work. Again, we reflected at the end of last year, how are they supporting the teachers? How can they best utilize their time since, there's only 3 to go around. So the feedback that we got is that, especially in the spring, John Hayes and Bridget Reed, who are mainly the ones responsible for supporting the teachers on a professional development plan, they were having a hard time to do that as well as supporting their new teachers. So what we did is we solely had John and Bridget focus on individual teachers that are on a PDAP assistance plan. And then I had Jeanette Susi just work with the teachers that are temporary teachers. We figured out of all the new teachers, who are the teachers that need the most support? Well, these are the teachers in our district that, maybe didn't go through a traditional education program, didn't have maybe the classroom management classes, and all the other supports. So we had Jeanette work with those individuals as far as that goes. And so quick numbers here, John and Bridget had close to 1,600 school visits throughout the year. It's about 113 a month, and Jeanette has been working with about 113 first-year teachers. So they've been really, really busy. And I think I've only got one slide left, and I know I'm probably way out of time, so I will try to wrap this up. So I think I just kind of captured some data on the annual teacher insight survey. So we do absolutely look at this, and we try to glean as much information as we can. So this is just a chart that shows from the last 3 years, and the teachers that are answering the questions, how many years do you plan to stay? So you kind of see from 2017 through 19, those first years, the first ones on the left are 8% and 10%. So it's just basically teachers saying that they're going to, this is going to be their last year, or it's the following year. And I looked at 15 and 16. There's really not much difference between those earlier years as well. So it's been pretty consistent as far as what they're saying, and absolutely in line with what Vanessa shared in her presentation. Why do teachers stay? And it's 21% says the ability to make positive impact on students, 19% say it's a positive school culture that makes them stay, and 16% is the collaboration that they have with their staff. So apologize for going so long. I'm just trying to get it all in, but that is all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Alba. We appreciate the information. Give me just 1 second. I'm getting an echo. All right. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Skipper or Mr. Alba on the recruitment and retention piece?
I had a question for Mr. Alba. Mr. Alba, as far as those teacher leadership opportunities, other than mentoring, are any of them compensated?
I was sorry, I was muted. There is a supplement for the lead mentor teachers and the mentor teachers. Every school gets up to 6 supplements to pay those teachers. I think it's $165, $169 for the year if they mentor 2 teachers. So it's not a very large supplement, but there is some type of compensation.
But as far as the other initiatives, is there any compensation for that besides mentoring?
As far as the CET, if the clinical educator training to support the new teachers, if they, you have, in order to have a college intern, you have to be CET trained as well. So, they do, the universities typically provide some kind of incentive for those teachers. If you mentor a teacher for their, junior or senior internship, they might offer them some college course credit, so they can take some continuing education courses, at a discount or for free.
Any follow-up questions, Mr. Tucci?
Hello? You there?
We're here. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah. Hey, first I'd like to say I really appreciate you all reaching out to the historic Black universities. We have Bethune-Cookman up in Volusia, but we also have Edwards in Jacksonville, and FAMU. One thing to kind of keep into consideration is when we're reaching out to students, they're going to be coming in through that alternative certification pathway, and that comes with its own sense of challenges and struggles. So just, wanted to make you all aware that, it's not just getting that person in the door, but mentoring them through that entire process. And, as a solution, I would definitely assist in going with you to these visits or what have you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I know I hadn't mentioned Lisa Stanley is another person in my department, and she's the one that helps those alternate certification individuals through our program. So she's also making school visits and constantly in communication with them as far as what they need and what supports that they need in order to take the steps necessary to get their professional certification. So she's also a very valuable part of my team. But I appreciate the offer. It never seems like we have enough bodies to go on those recruitment trips. So I'll definitely be in touch to see how we can partner together. To visit these colleges either in person or virtually to again help make those connections.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any additional questions for Mr. Alba or Ms. Skipper?
Ms. Belford, this is Katie Campbell. I just want to ask a question really to both of you. It seems like, and I'm sorry, there's an echo. I'm not sure if it's me or somebody else. It seems like as we move forward year by year, one thing that becomes just valuable property is the time factor, the professional development factor. I mean, it seems like over the last few years that is the professional development time has been whittled away, and for understandably, teachers want the time to plan and all of that, but a lot of our professional development then is having to be done during the school day. And I'm remembering back to the years that I was teaching, and it seems like we had professional development pretty regularly. I know for a fact that we had it more often, even in all 3 school districts where I taught. We had a larger number of days that we had professional development than BPS currently has now. But we're having to do more of that during the school day, which means we're having to have more subs, and it kind of causes problems on the other end. So I'm wondering, and I'm so thankful we had the one conference that was on a Saturday, but then we're asking people to come on their Saturdays. And so how can we maneuver some of this professional development, which provides the support that our teachers are needing and wanting, and provides the opportunity for them to have the input so they can be leaders and teachers? How do we maneuver that? And I guess I'd like to hear from both of you, how are we, and it seems like you're already kind of working around that, but, how are we going to do that with our limited time?
Well, I think the one positive that will come out of what we're dealing with right now with the school closures is that it's kind of forced everyone to kind of learn new ways of delivering information or maybe PD. So one thing that we're doing in our department is looking at, the PDs that we do offer maybe on a face-to-face and having to pull people out with subs and all that, what can we convert to a virtual platform now that more and more teachers are comfortable with that? And and maybe provide a greater access to teachers. The events that we had, the 138 teachers that came on a Saturday, or the 45 that came to the wellness event, those teachers that came were very appreciative, but that's only a small percentage of teachers district-wide that could have benefited through those events. So we're hopeful that maybe finding maybe a hybrid or finding those opportunities to provide more of a virtual platform would increase the participation as far as those kind of PD events. But I agree with you. It is a challenge to find the time with the limited PD days that we have in order to meet all the needs of all the teachers in our schools.
And I think just to piggyback off of Mr. Alba, I think going to something more digital sometimes would be helpful. I believe, and of course I'll stay in touch with everybody, that the Pinellas County program, that they're going to put their coaches training online. It also, again, these coaches are compensated for their time spent outside of the workday. So I don't know if there might be some grants we can collectively look for, some reallocation of funds to support a program like this. If you go back to, looking at the estimated cost of us losing 538 teachers and being able to save a couple $3 million by not having that loss and using that funds using those funds towards retention instead. Obviously, every school site has their priorities. I was just on a call for pre-K to second grade who is going to be implementing conscious discipline. And one thing that we talked about was having the administrators buy-in and the administrators' dedication to, focusing their PD on that this year instead of trying to start 25 different initiatives and having to cram all this training. And the teachers I've talked to regarding that Saturday training, again, they were paid for that Saturday training, and they also found it very valuable to be able to go and learn and participate and have the time to actually bring something that they learned back to their classroom, because I think sometimes that's what we're lacking in some of our PD sessions at the school sites is, it's a lot of sit and get and not a lot of, I think Linda Buffum said this term, and she's been trying to do it with her new teacher, but make and takes, where they leave whatever they're leaving, whether it's a digital session, whether it's a face-to-face session, they are leaving with something that they can actively implement the very next day in their classroom. So I think we just need to all be cognitive and conscious of that when we're doing professional development as well. And at the same time, respecting teachers' time, teaching 6 out of 7 periods, having to plan, grade, implement, all of that too, so that they still get a good amount of planning time, and also the needed professional development.
Thank you.
All right, any additional comments or questions on recruitment?
Ms. Belford, I just have one more on recruitment, if I could. I just wanted to share, Mr. Colucci had said way back in, I think it was, I can't remember which section, it was one of the earlier sections, about the resolution. And I just want to say I appreciate that, because one of the funny things is I was looking through the topics for today and just thinking about what we were going to talk about. I realized when it comes to recruitment and retention, it really is a partnership between the board and the district and BFT, because our current teachers can positively or negatively impact this process. And when they're positive about our district, about the profession, advertising is one thing, but every business, every marketing person knows that person-to-person recommendation is probably the biggest positive impact that you can make. When a friend tells you that this restaurant was stinky, you probably are not going to go. If they say it's the best thing ever, you're probably going to go try it. So when teachers are negative, similarly, it hurts us. And so I appreciate that acknowledgement that, we all have to be working on this together and saying we're not perfect, and definitely BPS has been through our struggles, especially in the last year and a half, but that positive effort, when I go to a page when our district is trying to advertise job openings, and I see, for example, on Facebook, negative, or people say, oh, don't come here, it's the worst ever. I'm like, oh, it crushes my heart, because we're only hurting ourselves. We're only keeping those people from wanting to come and work in our district, and then we've got classes that aren't being filled and subs that are having to come in. And so I just really appreciate that, because it really is going to take all of us. And sorry to get my soapbox for just a little bit, but I just, that really struck a chord with me. And so I definitely appreciate the efforts from you guys and the state level.
That was a good soapbox, Ms. Campbell. Thank you. Any additional comments or questions on recruitment and retention? Okay, well, we are at 3 hours and 37 minutes, so we are just under our 4-hour time frame that we had scheduled. And we'll certainly make some final closing comments, but Dr. Theddy, do you want to start to wrap us up?
I do. Thank you very much. I wanted to say thank you to the board and to BFT for this really cooperative and collaborative opportunity to share not only issues, but some proposed solutions. It's interesting to me that although we worked as a team to discuss the workshop topics with BFT, we did not actually discuss the presentation. So we don't have, my team didn't have information about what they were presenting. They didn't have necessarily information about what we were presenting. So it's really encouraging to me to see that not only did we identify similar issues, in many cases, we also identified similar solutions. I think that's half of it. We're halfway there. We just need to work together cooperatively to implement some of these so we can have an impact on our teachers. I'm looking forward to that continued collaboration with Anthony, Vanessa, Jonathan, and Kyle on these issues that are a huge concern for all of us. And I think working together, we can accomplish much to support the mental health of our teachers, to recruit and retain highly qualified teachers, and to enlist the valuable services of our substitute teachers so that we can address all of these issues. So I wanted to say a heartfelt thank you. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the effort, and I definitely look forward to the continued collaboration.
Thank you, Dr. Thaddy. Mr. Colucci, would you like to have some closing remarks?
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank the board again, and we've had 22 people on this call or webinar, so I appreciate all your time today. And I'm thrilled to have longer than 3 minutes to talk, as you're well aware of. I think the board knows that sometimes our frustration that we don't have a lot of time to discuss issues in depth with you guys as a whole. Of course, we do have one-on-one conversations, but it's a rare situation that we have you all in one room and are able to speak with you. So we do appreciate that. I just going forward, I was thinking, okay, so where do we go from here? I think a possible idea is you kind of saw who took the lead on each of our topics, and we kind of saw who took the lead on your topics. Maybe we could, be assigned to a district point of contact for each of our 4 topics, where we could continue discussing and really working on those solutions that we could agree to, and reporting back to the board. So I don't know if Dr. Theddy could maybe put that together. Of course, this was different doing this through Skype, but I think we had a very productive and informative day, and I appreciate it and look forward to continuing to collaborate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colucci. And Dr. Theddy, did you want to weigh in on his request for a point of contact on each of the 4 issues?
I've got it down as next step. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone else want to make some final closing comments before I wrap us up then?
Ms. Belford, this is Mark Mullins. I just wanted to echo Dr. Theddy's comments and just thank both BFT and all of the representatives for bringing forward obviously topics that are important to all of us as it impacts our employees, our teachers, and, you know, as a direct impact on the core mission of our work, educating and providing excellence to our kids. So very timely topics, obviously some thoughtful consideration went into both the union's presentation and contributions, but also want to say my thanks to Brevard Public School staff for their work in presenting the information they have. And clearly work has been done along the way, and there's work yet to be done. And but it's encouraging to know that we met today and had common thoughts around the topics as well, and some shared some willingness to have some shared responsibilities along the way. So appreciate that greatly and look forward to the next conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Anyone else? Going once, going twice. All right, then I will go ahead and wrap us up. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank everybody that participated today. I know a lot of work went into preparing. I very much appreciate the collaborative approach and the solutions-focused discussion. I think that was very helpful, not only to see that solutions were being put forward instead of just challenges, but also to see that there were so many overlaps in the solutions that district staff had identified, as well as the BFT team. And so that was very encouraging, I think. And I certainly appreciate the collaborative work that we are doing at this point and that we will do going forward to solve some of these huge issues. So thank you all for joining us today and taking so much time out of your day. We appreciate it immensely, and we look forward to what we'll do going forward. And with that, I will call this workshop adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.